The wedding ring on Lena Carter's finger cost more than her mother's life. That's exactly what Adrienne Voss intended. 4 weeks ago, she signed a contract written in desperation and sealed with vows that tasted like poison. Now she stands in a penthouse that gleams like a jewelry box, beautiful, cold, and locked from the outside. Her husband is a stranger who owns her days, controls her nights, and watches her with eyes that hold secrets she's terrified to uncover. But tonight, something shifts. Tonight, Adrienne's mask cracks just enough to reveal the monster, or the man, underneath. Stay with me until the end. Drop a like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in County General's ICU hummed like dying insects. Lena Carter had learned to hate that sound over the past 6 months. The mechanical wheeze of ventilators, the periodic beep of monitors, the shuffle of nurses' shoes against linoleum that had been mopped so many times it looked perpetually wet. She sat in the same plastic chair she'd occupied every night for weeks, her fingers wrapped around her mother's hand, feeling the papery skin and prominent bones beneath. Grace Carter had been beautiful once. Lena remembered photos from before the cancer, before the chemo that stole her hair and her appetite, before the medical bills that stole everything else. In those pictures, her mother smiled like she believed the world was good. Lena couldn't remember the last time she'd seen that smile in person. "Miss Carter?" The night nurse appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Visiting hours ended 20 minutes ago. I know." Lena didn't move. Just 5 more minutes. The nurse hesitated, sympathy softening her features. She'd bent the rules for Lena before. 5 minutes. Then I have to ask you to leave." After she disappeared, Lena leaned closer to her mother's sleeping face. "I got another shift tonight, Mom. Double pay because it's Saturday." She tried to inject enthusiasm into her voice, but exhaustion made it crack. "We're almost there. Just a few more months, and we'll have enough for the next treatment round." It was a lie. They both knew it was a lie, though her mother was too sedated to call her on it. The debt collectors had started calling 3 weeks ago. The hospital administration had begun using words like alternative care options and hospice. The experimental treatment her mother needed, the one that might actually save her life, cost more than Lena would earn in 5 years, even working 3 jobs. She kissed her mother's forehead and left. The bus ride to the warehouse district took 40 minutes. Lena used the time to change in the tiny bathroom at the back, swapping her hospital visit clothes for the black pants and polo shirt required by premium logistics. The warehouse ran a night shift processing returns for a dozen online retailers, and the work was mind-numbing. Scan, sort, stack, repeat. But it paid $10 an hour, and they didn't ask questions about her lack of college degree or the semester she'd abandoned halfway through when her mother got sick. She clocked in at 10:47 p.m., grabbed her scanner, and joined the line of workers at Station 7. "You look like hell," Marcus said, appearing beside her with 2 pallets of returns. He was 50-something, built like a retired linebacker, and the closest thing Lena had to a friend in this place. "Thanks. You really know how to make a girl feel special." "I'm serious." He dropped his voice. "You're going to collapse if you keep this up. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? I'll sleep when I'm dead." "That's what I'm worried about." Marcus fixed her with a look that reminded her of her father, before the car accident that had killed him and left her mother to raise a daughter alone. "Lena, you can't save her by destroying yourself. Watch me." She threw herself into the work, letting the repetitive motion numb her thoughts. Scan, sort, stack. Scan, sort, stack. The hours blurred together until her break at 2 a.m., when she stumbled to the break room and collapsed into a chair. Someone had left a newspaper on the table. An actual physical newspaper, the kind almost nobody read anymore. Lena was about to push it aside when a photograph on the business section caught her attention. The man in the photo looked like he'd been carved from marble and dressed by someone who understood that true power didn't need to announce itself. Dark hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and cold intelligence. His suit probably cost more than Lena's annual income, but it was his eyes that stopped her, pale gray, like winter ice, staring directly at the camera with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the cheap newsprint. "Adrienne Voss expands empire with waterfront development deal." the headline read. Lena had heard the name. Everyone in the city had heard the name. Adrian Voss was the kind of wealthy that transcended normal categories. Not just rich, but powerful in ways that made politicians nervous and competitors disappear. His companies touched everything: real estate, technology, import-export businesses that operated in the gray spaces where legal and illegal blurred together. The rumors about him ranged from ruthless businessman to something darker, something criminal, though nothing had ever stuck. She was about to turn the page when another article caught her eye, this one smaller, tucked into the corner. Voss Foundation Fund's Medical Research Wing. The piece mentioned his charitable contributions to cancer research and experimental treatments. Lena stared at the photo until her break ended. The rest of her shift passed in a haze. She clocked out at 6 a.m., caught the early bus home to the studio apartment she could barely afford, and collapsed onto her mattress without bothering to undress. Sleep came hard and left fast. The call came at 9:30 a.m. "Miss Carter?" The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. "This is Catherine Mills from Mercy Hospital's Financial Services Department. Do you have a moment to discuss your mother's account?" Lena's stomach dropped. "What about it?" "I'm afraid we've reached the limit of what we can provide without payment. Your mother's insurance has been exhausted and the outstanding balance is now $237,000. We need to discuss immediate payment arrangements, or we'll have to transfer her to a county facility that can accommodate patients without coverage." The words kept coming, but Lena stopped hearing them. County facility. That was code for somewhere she'll die faster. She'd visited the county hospital once, understaffed, overcrowded, people dying in hallways because there weren't enough rooms. "Miss Carter, are you still there?" "How long?" Lena's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "How long do I have?" "We can give you until Monday. After that, we'll need to proceed with the transfer." Monday, 2 days. Lena hung up without saying goodbye. She spent the rest of Saturday in a blur of desperate calculation. She called every bank, every loan shark, every predatory lending service that advertised on late-night television. The answers were all the same: no collateral, no credit history, no loan. By Saturday evening, she was out of options and out of hope. That's when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Miss Carter?" The voice was male this time, smooth and precise. "My name is James Garrett. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Adrian Voss. He'd like to meet with you this evening, if you're available." Lena's mind stuttered. "Adrian Voss? Why would... Mr. Voss has a proposition that may be of interest to you, given your current circumstances. He's willing to compensate you for your time. Shall we say 7 o'clock at Aurelius?" Aurelius. That was the restaurant on top of the Voss Tower, the one that required reservations 6 months in advance and had a dress code stricter than most weddings. "I can't afford..." "All expenses covered, of course. A car will collect you at 6:30. Do we have your agreement?" Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that nothing good came from powerful men making mysterious offers. But desperation made people stupid, and Lena was desperate enough to drown. "Okay," she heard herself say. "I'll be there." The car that arrived at 6:30 wasn't a car. It was a town car, with leather seats and a driver who wore gloves and called her ma'am. Lena spent the entire ride feeling like an imposter in her only dress, a black number she'd worn to her father's funeral 4 years ago and hadn't touched since. Aurelius occupied the entire top floor of Voss Tower, 60 stories above the city. The elevator that carried her up moved so smoothly she barely felt it, and when the doors opened, she stepped into a space that didn't seem real. The restaurant was all glass and steel and carefully calibrated lighting that made everything look like a fashion photograph. The other diners, and there were only a handful, each table separated by enough space to ensure private conversations, wore the kind of casual elegance that cost thousands of dollars to achieve. Lena felt every eye turn toward her as she stood frozen in the elevator doorway. "Miss Carter!" James Garrett materialized beside her, a slim man in his 40s with the kind of face that gave nothing away. "This way, please." He led her through the restaurant to a private alcove with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And there, rising from his chair with the fluid grace of a predator, was Adrian Voss. The photograph hadn't done him justice. Or maybe it had done him too much justice because the camera had managed to capture his physical perfection while missing the aura of controlled danger that radiated from him like heat. He was tall, easily 6'2", with the build of someone who exercised not for vanity, but for function. His suit was midnight blue, so dark it was almost black, cut to emphasize the breadth of his shoulders and the narrow taper of his waist. But it was his face that held her. The sharp jawline, the slash of dark eyebrows, the mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. And those eyes, gray as winter ice, fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run. "Miss Carter." His voice matched the rest of him, smooth, controlled, with an edge underneath that suggested violence held barely in check. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." It wasn't a request. Lena sat. A waiter appeared with wine, something red and probably worth more than her rent. She didn't touch it. Adrian took a single sip of his own glass, studying her over the rim with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. "I appreciate punctuality," he said, setting down his glass. "It's a rare quality." "You didn't tell me why I'm here." "Direct. Also rare." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face, gone too quickly to be sure. "You're here because you need something I can provide, and I need something you can give me." "I don't have anything." "Your mother is dying." He said it without inflection, a simple statement of fact. Grace Carter, 52 years old, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The hospital is transferring her to county care in 48 hours, where she will receive minimal treatment and likely die within 6 weeks. The experimental protocol at Johns Hopkins would give her a 60% survival rate, but it costs $400,000 and isn't covered by insurance. Lena's hands clenched in her lap. "How do you know?" "I make it my business to know things." Adrian leaned back in his chair, and the motion somehow made him look more dangerous, not less, especially about people who interest me. "Why would I interest you? I'm nobody. You're a 22-year-old college dropout working 3 minimum wage jobs to pay for treatment that will never be enough. You haven't slept more than 4 hours a night in 6 months. You've lost 15 pounds you couldn't afford to lose. And despite all of this, you show up for every shift on time, you visit your mother every single day, and you haven't once complained to the hospital staff or made a scene, even though you have every right to do both." He paused. "That kind of strength interests me." "Sterile?" The waiter returned with appetizers Lena hadn't ordered. She stared at the plate, something with foam and microgreens, and felt nausea roll through her stomach. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "Marriage." The word hung in the air between them like a blade. Lena laughed. It came out bitter and broken. "You're insane. I'm practical." Adrian's expression didn't change. "I need a wife for reasons that don't concern you. The arrangement would be purely contractual. No emotional involvement, no physical relationship unless you consent to one, no expectations beyond the terms we agree upon. In exchange, I'll pay for your mother's treatment at Johns Hopkins, including all associated costs and aftercare. I'll also provide you with a living allowance of $10,000 per month for the duration of the marriage." "Duration?" 1 year minimum. After that, you're free to file for divorce. I'll provide a settlement of $500,000, enough to ensure both you and your mother are comfortable." Lena's mind was reeling. "This is crazy. Why would you? Why me?" "Because you're desperate enough to agree, smart enough to understand the terms, and invisible enough that no one will question it." Adrian picked up his wine glass again, studying the liquid like it held answers. "I've had you investigated, Miss Carter. You have no criminal record, no social media presence, no entanglements that would complicate the arrangement. You're also fiercely loyal and stubborn enough to hold to an agreement once you make it." "You investigated me." Anger cut through the shock. "You had no right. I have the resources to do what I need to do." His tone didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Let's be clear about what this is. I'm not offering you a fairy tale. I'm offering you a transaction, your time and discretion in exchange for your mother's life, that's all. If you find those terms unacceptable, you can leave now, and I'll have James drive you home." Lena looked at him, this stranger who held all the cards, and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. He wasn't offering her a choice. He was offering her an ultimatum dressed up as a choice, and they both knew it. "I want to see the contract," she said. "Every word. And I want to talk to a lawyer before I sign anything." For the first time, Adrian smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Fair enough. James will provide you with the documents tomorrow. You'll have until Monday morning to review them and make your decision. He stood, the motion fluid and final. The car will take you home. Think carefully, Miss Carter. This opportunity won't come again. He walked away without looking back, leaving Lena alone with a plate of food she couldn't eat, and a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. The contract arrived Sunday morning via courier. It was 47 pages long, written in language that made Lena's head hurt. She spent the day reading it over and over, looking for the trap she knew had to be hidden somewhere in the legal jargon. The terms were exactly as Adrian had described. Marriage for a minimum of 1 year. She would live in his residence, attend functions as required, and maintain the appearance of a legitimate relationship. No physical intimacy unless both parties consented. Her mother's treatment would begin immediately upon signing, fully funded. $10,000 a month in personal allowance. $500,000 settlement upon divorce. The trap, she finally realized, was that there was no trap. The contract was exactly what it claimed to be. A business arrangement that would save her mother's life in exchange for a year of her own. She visited her mother that afternoon. Grace was awake, groggy from pain medication, but coherent enough to squeeze Lena's hand. "Hey, baby," she whispered. "You look tired." "I'm okay, Mom." "You're a terrible liar." Grace's eyes, still sharp despite the drugs, studied her daughter's face. "What's wrong?" Lena almost told her, almost explained about Adrian Voss and his impossible offer and the contract sitting in her apartment. But what would be the point? Her mother couldn't help. She could only worry, and worry would drain what little strength she had left. "Nothing's wrong," Lena said, smoothing her mother's hair back from her forehead. "Everything's going to be fine." Another terrible lie. But Grace smiled, and for just a moment Lena saw her mother as she used to be. Strong, bright, unbreakable. "Whatever you're planning, sweetheart, make sure it's for you, not just for me. Promise me that." "I promise," Lena lied. She signed the contract Monday morning in James Garrett's office, a sleek space on the 45th floor of Voss Tower. Her hand shook as she put pen to paper, but her signature came out clear and strong. "Excellent," James said, sliding the papers into a folder. "The wedding ceremony will take place this Friday at 2 p.m. Small affair, just witnesses for legal purposes. I'll have appropriate attire delivered to your apartment by Wednesday." "That fast?" "Mr. Voss doesn't believe in delays." James handed her a black credit card with her name already embossed on it. "Your monthly allowance has been activated. Your mother's transfer to Johns Hopkins is scheduled for tomorrow morning. A medical team will accompany her." It was real. It was actually happening. Lena left the building in a daze, the credit card burning in her pocket like a brand. She'd sold herself. That's what she'd done, no matter how James Garrett dressed it up in legal language. She'd sold herself to a stranger for money. But when she visited the hospital that evening and saw the relief on her mother's face as the doctors explained the new treatment protocol, saw the hope that replaced the resignation, Lena knew she'd do it again. She'd sign that contract 1,000 times if it meant her mother lived. The wedding took place in a courthouse that smelled like old paper and floor wax. Lena wore a white dress that fit perfectly despite James never asking her size. Another reminder of how thoroughly Adrian Voss had investigated her life. Adrian wore a suit that probably cost more than her mother's first car, and his expression throughout the brief ceremony remained as cold and remote as it had been in the restaurant. "I do," Lena said when prompted, her voice steady. "I do," Adrian replied, his tone suggesting he was approving a business expense. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Adrian didn't kiss her. He simply took her hand, his grip cool and impersonal, and led her out of the courthouse to a waiting car. They drove in silence to the penthouse. Lena had known it would be nice. Adrian Voss didn't do anything halfway, but she hadn't been prepared for the reality. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building in the financial district, accessible only by a private elevator that required a key card. When the doors opened into the main living space, Lena stepped out and felt her breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire level, offering views of the city that looked like something from a movie. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive materials: leather, glass, polished wood. Original art hung on the walls, pieces Lena vaguely recognized from her single semester of art history. The space was beautiful and cold, designed for looking at, not living in. "Your room is on the 2nd level," Adrian said, his first words since leaving the courthouse. "James had your things moved from your apartment this morning. You'll find appropriate clothing in the closet. There's a household staff, but they only come during the day. Evenings, we're alone. Where's your room? Third level. You won't need to go up there. He shrugged out of his jacket, and Lena noticed the gun in a holster under his arm. He saw her looking and didn't bother to hide it. The kitchen is fully stocked. Eat whatever you want. If you need anything specific, tell James and he'll arrange it. What about the rules? Lena asked. What am I allowed to do? Where can I go? Adrian turned to look at her, and his eyes were colder than she remembered. You're my wife now, Miss Carter. Not my prisoner. You can do what you like, go where you like, but you'll do it with security, and you'll be back here every night by 10. Any violation of that rule, and the contract is void. Security. I have enemies. They'll try to use you against me if they discover you're unprotected. He moved toward the stairs leading to the upper levels. Dinner is at 7. Don't be late. He left her standing in the living room, alone in a gilded cage. The first week was worse than Lena had imagined. Adrian maintained the emotional distance of a stranger, polite but remote, acknowledging her presence only when necessary. They ate dinner together in silence every evening, him reviewing documents while she pushed food around her plate. He never asked about her day, never made conversation, never looked at her for longer than was absolutely necessary. But he watched her. Lena felt his eyes on her constantly, even when he pretended to be focused on his phone or his papers. It was like living with a predator who was deciding whether she was prey or property. The security guards followed her everywhere, to the hospital to visit her mother, to the grocery store when she needed something, even to the coffee shop down the street when she couldn't stand being in the penthouse for another minute. Her mother's treatment was going well. The doctors at Johns Hopkins were optimistic, using words like promising and encouraging. Grace had color in her cheeks for the first time in months, and when Lena visited, her mother actually smiled. You seem different, Grace said during one visit. Something's changed. I got a new job, Lena said, which wasn't technically a lie. Better pay, better hours. That's wonderful, baby. Grace reached for her hand, and Lena noticed her mother was wearing the wedding ring she'd never taken off, even after Lena's father died. You've been taking care of me for so long. It's time someone took care of you. Lena thought about Adrian's cold eyes and colder penthouse and said nothing. The breaking point came on day 8. Lena had gone to the coffee shop, her one act of rebellion in a life that had become a schedule of approved activities. She was sitting by the window drinking overpriced espresso and pretending to read a book when Adrian appeared. He didn't sit down. He just stood there, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. You quit your jobs, he said. What? Your 3 jobs. You called all of them yesterday and quit. His voice was flat. Why? Because I don't need them anymore. Lena set down her coffee, anger rising. Or am I supposed to keep working minimum wage while you give me a monthly allowance worth more than I used to make in 6 months? I didn't tell you to quit. You didn't tell me not to. Something flickered in his eyes. Irritation, maybe, or something deeper. You need structure, purpose. Sitting in this coffee shop every day isn't living. Neither is sitting in your penthouse every day, waiting for you to deign to speak to me. Lena stood, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, but she didn't back down. You want to control where I go and when I'm home and what I wear. Fine, that's the deal. But you don't get to control whether I work or not. That's mine. For a long moment, Adrian just stared at her. Then he turned and walked out without another word. That night, he didn't come home for dinner. Lena ate alone, went to bed alone, and woke the next morning to find a note on the kitchen counter in handwriting she didn't recognize. If you want purpose, come to my office at noon. AV. She almost didn't go. Pride and stubbornness warred with curiosity and boredom. Curiosity won. Adrian's office occupied an entire floor of Voss Tower, and when Lena arrived, escorted by her ever-present security, James Garrett was waiting. Mr. Voss is in a meeting, he said. He asked me to show you around until he's available. The office was everything Lena expected. Expensive, imposing, designed to intimidate. But what caught her attention were the side rooms, conference spaces filled with people working on projects she didn't understand. Technology, real estate, import logistics. What is all this? She asked. Mr. Voss's various business interests, James said smoothly. He runs 17 companies with over 3,000 employees worldwide. And you want me to what? Answer phones? Mr. Voss thought you might be interested in the foundation work. James gestured to a smaller office, separate from the main bustle. The Voss Foundation funds medical research and patient assistance programs. They could use someone with your perspective. Lena stepped into the office and saw files stacked on every surface. Grant applications, research proposals, patient requests. The woman behind the desk looked harried and overwhelmed. 3 people quit last month, James continued. The work is intensive and emotionally difficult. Most people can't handle it. But you think I can. Mr. Voss thinks you can. The door opened behind them, and Adrian walked in. He'd shed his jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars she'd never noticed before. "Miss Reeves," he said to the overwhelmed woman, "this is Mrs. Voss. She'll be joining the foundation starting Monday." Mrs. Voss. The name sent a jolt through Lena's system, the first time anyone had called her that. The woman, Reeves, looked between them with obvious relief. "Thank God. We're drowning in applications, and the medical review board needs someone who can actually read these files without giving up halfway through." "I'm not qualified," Lena started. "You spent 6 months navigating the medical system," Adrian interrupted. His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something other than cold distance in them. "You know exactly how broken it is, and exactly what people need to survive it. That makes you more qualified than anyone else here." He left without waiting for her response. Lena started Monday morning, and by Wednesday, she understood why people quit. The foundation received hundreds of applications every week. People desperate for help, for hope, for someone to care that they were dying and couldn't afford to stop dying. Reading their stories was like ripping open her own wounds over and over. But she was good at it. She learned the medical language, understood the insurance complexities, could spot the cases that genuinely needed help versus the ones trying to game the system. And slowly, day by day, she began approving applications that meant someone's mother or father or child would get to live. Adrian noticed. He didn't say anything, but she caught him watching her sometimes when she worked late in the foundation office, his expression unreadable. The penthouse became less of a cage. They still ate dinner together in silence, but now the silence felt different, not hostile, just waiting. Like both of them were holding their breath, anticipating something neither was ready to name. 3 weeks into the marriage, Lena woke up at 2 a.m. to find the penthouse dark and Adrian not home. She told herself she didn't care, that his schedule wasn't her business, but she couldn't fall back asleep. He came home at 4 a.m., moving through the darkness with the silence of someone who'd learned how to disappear. Lena watched from the stairs as he poured himself a drink and stood by the windows, staring out at the city. There was blood on his shirt cuff. "Are you hurt?" The words came out before she could stop them. Adrian didn't turn. "Go back to bed. You're bleeding. It's not my blood." He downed the drink in one swallow. "Go back to bed, Lena." It was the first time he'd used her first name. She went back to bed, but she didn't sleep. The next morning, she found him in the kitchen making coffee with his shirt changed and no sign of whatever had happened the night before. He handed her a cup without being asked, and their fingers brushed. His skin was warm. For some reason, that surprised her. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "The foundation work. She struggled to find words. "It matters?" Adrian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "You're welcome." It was such a small moment, barely worth noting. But later, Lena would remember it as the first time the ice between them began to crack. 4 weeks after the wedding, Lena stood in the penthouse bathroom at 6 a.m., staring at her reflection and trying to understand why the world wouldn't stop spinning. She'd been feeling off for days, nauseous in the mornings, exhausted in the afternoons, strange cramps that came and went without pattern. She'd chalked it up to stress, to the adjustment of her new life, to the emotional toll of reading desperate applications every day. But this morning, as she gripped the sink and fought the urge to vomit, a terrible thought occurred to her. She pulled out her phone and checked the calendar. Her period was late. Not just a little late. 2 weeks late. No, that wasn't possible. She and Adrian they'd barely touched, let alone, but there had been the wedding night. Lena's memory of that night was fragmented, dreamlike. She remembered coming back to the penthouse, Remembered Adrian pouring them both a drink to celebrate the contract being fulfilled. She remembered feeling dizzy, emotional, overwhelmed. She didn't remember. The details slipped away like water through fingers. Had something happened? Had she been too exhausted to remember clearly? Had there been a moment where the careful distance between them had collapsed? Her hands shook as she counted back the weeks, trying to match dates to symptoms. It couldn't be. She needed a test. The pharmacy was 2 blocks away. Lena threw on clothes and headed for the elevator, not bothering to call her security detail. Let Adrian be angry. This was too important. She bought 3 different brands of pregnancy tests and took them back to the penthouse, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. In the bathroom, she followed the instructions with shaking hands. 3 minutes. That's how long it would take. She couldn't watch. She left the tests on the counter and walked out, pacing the bedroom like a caged animal. This was impossible. She and Adrian had a contract, a clear agreement. No physical relationship unless both parties consented. She would remember if they'd... Wouldn't she? The 3 minutes passed like hours. When she finally forced herself to look, all 3 tests showed the same result, positive. Lena sat on the bathroom floor for what might have been 10 minutes or an hour, staring at the 3 plastic sticks lined up on the counter like evidence at a crime scene. The word pregnant kept cycling through her mind, but it wouldn't connect to any coherent thought. It was like trying to solve a math problem where all the numbers had turned into symbols she didn't recognize. She needed to think. She needed to figure out what had happened, when it had happened, whether it had actually happened at all. But her brain felt wrapped in cotton, every thought moving through thick resistance. The sound of the front door opening snapped her back to reality. Adrian was home, earlier than usual, which meant something was wrong, or he needed something. Lena scrambled to her feet, grabbed the tests, and shoved them into the small trash can under the sink. Her hands were still shaking. She splashed water on her face and forced herself to breathe. In, out, in, out. She could do this. She could walk out of this bathroom and act normal until she figured out what the hell was happening. Adrian was in the kitchen when she emerged, pouring coffee from the machine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He'd loosened his tie, and there was tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there this morning. "You left without security," he said, without turning around. Of course he knew. The man probably had tracking devices in her shoes. "I went to the pharmacy, 2 blocks. I didn't think..." "Don't!" He turned, and his eyes were harder than usual. "You don't think. That's the problem. I told you the rules. You agreed to them. I needed something, then you call security and they take you. That's how this works." He set down his cup with enough force that coffee sloshed over the rim. "My enemies don't care if you're running a quick errand. They care that you're unprotected and vulnerable, and they will use that." Lena felt anger surge through the fear and confusion. "I'm not a child. Then stop acting like one. You don't own me." "Actually," Adrian said, his voice dropping to something cold and precise, "according to the contract you signed, I do. For the next 11 months, your safety is my responsibility, which means you follow the rules or the contract is void." The threat hung between them, sharp and clear. If he voided the contract, her mother's treatment stopped. Everything stopped. Lena's hands clenched at her sides. "Fine. I'll call security next time I need tampons. Will that satisfy your control issues?" She regretted the words the moment they left her mouth, not because they were cruel, but because they were a lie. She didn't need tampons. She wouldn't need them for months, if the tests were right. Adrian's expression didn't change. "I don't have control issues. I have enemies who would kill you without a second thought if they discovered you were important to me. But I'm not important to you. You said it yourself. This is a business arrangement." Something flickered across his face, too fast to identify. "That doesn't mean I want you dead." He left the kitchen without another word, and Lena heard his office door close with a decisive click. She stood there for a long moment, fighting the urge to scream or cry or throw something expensive against the wall. Instead, she pulled out her phone and called the one person who might have answers. James Garrett answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Voss, how can I help you?" "I need to see a doctor," Lena said, keeping her voice low. "Not at the regular hospital. Somewhere private." There was a pause. "Are you ill?" "I need tests run." Blood work, the kind that stays confidential. Another pause, longer this time. James Garrett hadn't survived working for Adrian Voss by being stupid. He knew exactly what kind of test she meant. I'll arrange it, he said finally. This afternoon, if possible. Yes. And James? Adrian can't know. I understand. But his tone suggested he understood more than she wanted him to. The clinic James sent her to was in a part of the city where buildings had doormen and everyone wore clothes that cost more than Lena used to make in a month. The security team dropped her at the entrance with instructions to text when she was ready to leave, and for once, Lena was grateful for their discretion. The doctor was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands. Dr. Sarah Chen, her nameplate read. She didn't ask unnecessary questions, just took Lena's blood and explained the tests she'd run. How long until I get results? Lena asked. Blood work takes a few hours. I can call you this evening with preliminary results, and we'll schedule a follow-up if needed. Dr. Chen paused. Is there anything else you want to tell me? Any concerns about the pregnancy, if that's what this is? Lena thought about the wedding night she couldn't fully remember, the gaps in her memory that felt more like missing chapters than simple forgetfulness. Is it possible to be pregnant and not remember the moment it happened? Dr. Chen's expression shifted, professional concern replacing gentle neutrality. Are you suggesting you were unconscious or incapacitated during intercourse? No. Maybe. I don't know. Lena pressed her palms against her eyes. I remember parts of that night, but not all of it. And I don't remember anything that would result in this. Memory can be affected by trauma, stress, alcohol consumption, certain medications. The doctor leaned forward. If you're concerned about assault, it's not that. At least Lena didn't think it was. Adrian was cold, controlling, sometimes cruel in his precision. But a rapist? She couldn't make that fit with the man who'd given her meaningful work and watched over her mother's treatment like a promise he refused to break. I just need to know if I'm pregnant. The rest I can figure out later. Dr. Chen didn't look convinced, but she nodded. I'll call you this evening. The afternoon stretched like taffy. Lena went back to the penthouse, buried herself in foundation applications, and tried not to think about the call that would come. She approved 3 grant requests, denied 2 that looked fraudulent, and flagged 1 for additional review. The work usually grounded her, gave her purpose. Today, it just filled time. Adrian came home at 6, and they ate dinner in their usual silence. But tonight, Lena felt his eyes on her more than usual, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. You're quiet, he said finally. I'm always quiet. Quieter than usual. He set down his fork. The pharmacy trip this morning. What did you need? Lena's mind raced. She should lie. She should deflect. Instead, something reckless made her say, Do you remember our wedding night? Adrian went very still. Why are you asking? Because I don't. Not all of it. She met his eyes, refusing to look away. We had drinks. You poured them. We toasted the contract. And then, it gets fuzzy. You were exhausted. You fell asleep on the couch. His voice was carefully neutral. I carried you to your room and left. That's all? What else would there be? But something in his expression had shifted, become guarded in a way that set off alarms in Lena's head. I don't know. You tell me. Adrian stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I have work to do. Adrian, this conversation is over. He left, and Lena sat alone at the table, her dinner going cold, her stomach churning with questions that had no good answers. Her phone rang at 8. Dr. Chen's voice was professional and gentle. Mrs. Voss, I have your results. You are indeed pregnant. Based on your hormone levels, I'd estimate you're about 4 weeks along. 4 weeks. That aligned exactly with the wedding night. There's something else, Dr. Chen continued. Your blood work showed trace amounts of a sedative. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would harm the fetus, but enough to cause memory disruption and lowered inhibitions. Did you take anything that night? Prescription medication, perhaps? Lena's world tilted. No, I don't take anything. Then someone gave it to you. Dr. Chen's voice hardened. Mrs. Voss, I need to ask again. Do you feel safe in your current situation? Did she? Lena thought about Adrian's cold control, his rules and surveillance. She thought about the gun he wore like jewelry and the blood that sometimes appeared on his clothes. She thought about enemies who would kill her without hesitation and a husband who'd bought her like property. But she also thought about the foundation work he'd given her, the way he'd never once pressured her for anything physical, the careful distance he maintained like a man trying not to cross a line he'd drawn for himself. "I'm safe," she said, not entirely sure if it was true. "If that changes, if you need help, call me. Day or night?" Dr. Chen paused. "You should schedule a full obstetric appointment. The pregnancy appears normal, but we'll want to monitor you closely given the circumstances." After she hung up, Lena sat in her room with her phone in her hand and fury building in her chest like a storm. Someone had drugged her. Someone had taken away her ability to consent, to remember, to control what happened to her own body. And she had a pretty good idea who. She found Adrian in his office on the 3rd floor, the space she'd been tacitly forbidden from entering. She didn't knock, just pushed open the door and walked in. Adrian looked up from his computer, surprise flickering across his face before his mask slammed back into place. "You're not supposed to be up here." "I'm pregnant." The words dropped like stones. Adrian's expression went completely blank, which somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "Apparently not." Lena stepped further into the room, and she saw him tense like an animal preparing to strike or flee. 4 weeks. Which means it happened on our wedding night. The wedding night I can't fully remember because someone put sedatives in my drink. I didn't... He stopped, his jaw clenching. It wasn't supposed to happen. What wasn't supposed to happen? Drugging me? Getting me pregnant? Or were both of those part of some plan you forgot to mention? I never touched you. Adrian stood, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely shaken. I swear to you, I never... Then explain how I'm pregnant with your child. It's not mine. It can't be mine. He moved around the desk, not toward her but away, like he needed distance. I'm infertile. Medical fact. I can't have children. Lena laughed, and it came out bitter and broken. Apparently someone forgot to tell your sperm that. You don't understand. Adrian's voice was rough now, stripped of its usual control. When I was 17, I was shot. The damage was extensive, multiple surgeries, permanent complications. Every doctor who examined me said the same thing. Conception is impossible. And yet here we are. It's not mine. But he said it like he was trying to convince himself. Then whose is it? Lena felt tears prick her eyes and hated herself for it. I haven't been with anyone. The only man I've even been near in the past 2 months is you. Adrian stared at her, and something in his expression cracked. Not the mask that stayed firmly in place, but underneath she saw confusion and fear and something that might have been wonder if the circumstances weren't so twisted. The wedding night, he said slowly. What do you remember? Drinks, toasting, feeling dizzy. Lena closed her eyes, trying to pull details from the fog. You caught me when I stumbled. Your hands were warm. You said something about being careful. And then what? The memory surfaced like a fish breaking water, brief, fragmentary, but undeniably real. You carried me to bed, but I woke up. I was confused, emotional. I asked you to stay. You were drugged. You didn't know what you were saying. Did you stay? Adrian's silence was answer enough. Oh my God, Lena pressed her hands to her face. You did. We did. And you don't remember either, do you? I remember enough. His voice had gone rough, almost desperate. You were vulnerable. I should have left. I should have... Why were there sedatives in my drink? The question cut through everything else. You said you didn't drug me, but someone did. I don't know. But his expression suggested otherwise. Liar. Adrian's eyes snapped to hers, and for a moment she saw rage there, bright and terrible. Then it was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. The drinks were prepared by the catering service for the wedding. James arranged everything. Standard celebration setup, champagne, glasses, ice. I didn't check them. I didn't think I needed to. You think James drugged us? I think someone did, and there are only a handful of people who could have accessed those drinks before they reached us. Adrian moved to the window, his back to her. James has been with me for 15 years. He's never given me reason to doubt his loyalty. Until now. Until now. Lena's mind was spinning, trying to fit pieces together that refused to form a coherent picture. Why would he do that? What would he gain? I don't know. Adrian's reflection in the window looked carved from stone. But I'm going to find out. And the pregnancy? We'll schedule a paternity test. Once we have proof, it's yours. Lena didn't know why she was so certain, but she was. I can feel it. This is your child. That's not medically possible. And yet, they stood in silence, two people who'd become unwitting parents through circumstances neither understood nor fully controlled. Finally, Adrian turned to face her. What do you want to do? He asked. It was the first time he'd ever asked her what she wanted. Lena thought about the tests sitting in her bathroom trash, about her mother recovering in Johns Hopkins, about the contract that bound her to this man for 11 more months. She thought about the life growing inside her that shouldn't exist but did. I want the truth, she said. About that night, about the drugs, about why this happened, and I want you to stop lying to me. I haven't lied. You've withheld, which is the same thing. Lena moved closer, and she saw him tense again. We're going to be parents, Adrian. Whether you believe it or not, whether you want it or not, that means we need to figure out how to be honest with each other, starting now. Adrian studied her face, and for the first time his mask cracked enough that she saw the man underneath, terrified, confused, and holding on to control by his fingernails. I don't know how to do this, he admitted quietly. Neither do I. Lena's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. But we're going to have to learn. The next morning, Adrian summoned James Garrett to the penthouse at 7 a.m. Lena watched from the kitchen as the two men stood in the living room, their voices low but tense. She couldn't hear everything, but she caught fragments. The wedding drinks? I arranged them myself, sir. Standard protocol. Trace sedatives. That's not possible. James looked genuinely shocked, which either meant he was innocent or an excellent actor. Lena couldn't tell which. Someone had access, Adrian said, his voice cold enough to freeze. Someone prepared those drinks specifically to incapacitate us both. Find out who. Sir, I swear to you, I don't want your oath. I want answers. Adrian's tone didn't rise, but the threat underneath was unmistakable. You have 72 hours. After that, you're done. James left looking pale and shaken. Adrian stood by the window for a long time after, his hands clenched at his sides. You believe him, Lena said. I believe he believes he's innocent. Adrian turned, which means someone used him without his knowledge, or he's lying better than I've ever seen him lie. What happens if you can't find out who did it? Then we live with not knowing. His eyes met hers. And we deal with the consequences. The consequences were becoming more apparent every day. Lena's morning sickness hit with a vengeance, leaving her hunched over the toilet at ungodly hours. Adrian started checking on her, appearing in the bathroom doorway with ginger tea and crackers, his expression unreadable, but his actions speaking louder than words. You don't have to do this, Lena said one morning after a particularly brutal round of vomiting. You're carrying my child. He said it like he was testing the words, seeing how they felt in his mouth. That makes it my responsibility. You still don't believe it's yours. I believe the evidence. Adrian handed her a damp washcloth. My belief doesn't change the biology. But something was changing. Lena saw it in the way he watched her now, not with the cold assessment of property, but with something closer to concern. He started coming home earlier, abandoning late-night meetings for dinners where they actually talked instead of sitting in silence. Tell me about your mother, he said one evening. Lena looked up, surprised. What about her? What was she like before she got sick? It was such an unexpected question that Lena didn't know how to answer at first. Strong, stubborn. She worked 2 jobs after my dad died, made sure I had everything I needed for school. She used to sing while she cooked, old songs, stuff from when she was young. I hated it when I was a teenager, thought it was embarrassing. Now I'd give anything to hear it again. She's getting better, Adrian said. The doctors are pleased with her progress. I know. I called Johns Hopkins this morning. Lena studied his face, looking for the angle. You've been getting updates on her treatment. Of course, I'm paying for it. You're tracking her recovery like you track everything else in your life. Is that a criticism? It's an observation. Lena pushed her food around her plate. You control what you can control. It's how you operate. And you find that objectionable. I find it exhausting. She met his eyes. But I'm starting to understand why you do it. Adrian's expression shifted, something unguarded flickering across his face. Why do I do it? Because the alternative is chaos, and chaos gets people killed. Lena thought about the gun he wore, the blood that sometimes appeared, the enemies he'd warned her about. You're not wrong. The world you live in doesn't allow for weakness. No, Adrian agreed quietly. It doesn't. But this, she gestured between them, isn't the world. It's just us. And maybe you don't have to control everything here. He looked at her for a long moment, and Lena saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Uncertainty. I don't know how to be anything else, he said. Then we'll figure it out together. It was a small moment, barely worth noting. But later, Lena would remember it as the second crack in the ice between them. The paternity test happened 2 weeks later. Dr. Chen arranged everything with her usual discretion, explaining the procedure with clinical efficiency. Adrian was silent throughout, his jaw tight enough that Lena could see the muscle jumping. Results in 5 days, Dr. Chen said, after she'd taken the necessary samples. But, Mrs. Voss, I should tell you, the pregnancy is developing normally. You're at 7 weeks now. We should start thinking about prenatal care, nutrition, all the standard protocols. Assuming the child is mine, Adrian said. Dr. Chen looked at him with the kind of expression doctors reserved for difficult patients. Mr. Voss, regardless of paternity, your wife is pregnant and needs medical care. I suggest we proceed accordingly. After they left the clinic, Adrian was silent the entire ride home. Lena let him stew, too tired to navigate whatever internal war he was fighting. But that night she woke to find him standing in her bedroom doorway. Adrian? She sat up, heart hammering. What's wrong? I need to tell you something. He stepped into the room but kept his distance, like approaching a wild animal. About that night. About what I remember. Lena waited, barely breathing. I carried you to bed like I said. You were drugged, barely coherent. I should have left. Adrian's voice was rough, stripped of its usual control. But you grabbed my hand, asked me not to go, said you didn't want to be alone. I don't remember that. You wouldn't. You were half asleep, confused. I told myself I'd just stay until you fell asleep properly, make sure you were all right. He paused. But you kept talking about your father, about how he died, about being scared of losing people you love. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. She'd never told anyone about that fear, not even her mother. You asked me if I ever got scared, Adrian continued. I told you no. You called me a liar. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his face. You said everyone gets scared, even people like me, especially people like me. What did you say? I told you the truth, that I stopped being scared a long time ago, when I realized fear was just another form of control. Adrian moved closer, and in the dim light from the hallway, Lena could see the strain on his face. But then you asked if I was scared of you, and I didn't have an answer. Are you? Lena whispered. Scared of me? Terrified. The word came out raw. You're the first thing in 15 years that I can't control, can't predict, can't lock down with contracts and rules and careful distance. And now you're carrying my child, a child that shouldn't exist, that breaks every medical certainty I've been told my entire adult life. Adrian, let me finish. He was close enough now that she could see his eyes, and what she saw there made her breath catch. That night, you fell asleep while we were talking. I should have left then, but I didn't. I stayed, and when you woke up again in the middle of the night, you were crying. I tried to comfort you, and you... I what? You kissed me. Adrian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You were drugged, vulnerable, not thinking clearly. I knew that. But I kissed you back anyway, and then we slept together. Yes. He closed his eyes. I took advantage of you when you were incapacitated. I broke my own rules, violated the contract, did exactly what I promised I would never do. And now you're pregnant, and it's my fault. Lena sat with this information, turning it over in her mind. Part of her wanted to be angry. He'd known she was drugged and he'd proceeded anyway. But another part of her recognized the complexity, the gray areas where consent blurred under the influence of sedatives and exhaustion and emotions neither of them had been prepared to handle. "Did I say no?" she asked quietly. Adrian's eyes snapped open. "What? That night? When you kissed me back, when things progressed? Did I say no? Did I try to stop it? You said—" He struggled with the words. "You said you wanted me to stay, that you didn't want to be alone, that you felt safe with me. But did I say no? You weren't capable of consent. That's the point. Maybe." Lena pulled her knees to her chest. "Or maybe we were both drugged, both compromised, both made decisions we wouldn't have made otherwise. Maybe neither of us is the villain here. Someone drugged us deliberately." Adrian's voice hardened. "Someone wanted this to happen." "Do you know why?" James found something. Adrian pulled out his phone, pulled up a file. The catering company that prepared the wedding drinks. They were hired through a shell corporation that traces back to Marcus Kane. The name meant nothing to Lena. "Who's that?" "My former business partner. We dissolved the partnership 5 years ago after I discovered he was using our import business to traffic weapons. I cut him out, took the company, and made sure he couldn't operate in this city again." Adrian's expression went cold. "He's been looking for revenge ever since." "Why would getting me pregnant be revenge?" "Because he knows my medical history. He knows I was told I'd never have children." Adrian met her eyes. "If you're carrying my child, a child that shouldn't exist, it becomes leverage, proof that I'm not as invincible as I pretend, a weakness he can exploit." Lena's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. "You think he drugged us so I'd get pregnant?" "I think he drugged us hoping we'd do something stupid, and getting you pregnant was an unexpected bonus." Adrian's jaw clenched. "Either way, now he knows you're vulnerable, and that makes you a target." "What are you going to do?" "Whatever I have to." The cold certainty in his voice made Lena shiver. "But first, we need those paternity results. Because if this child is mine, if the impossible actually happened, then everything changes." The results came 3 days later, delivered by Dr. Chen in person. She sat in the penthouse living room with Lena and Adrian, her expression carefully professional. "The test confirms it," she said, handing Adrian the file. "The child is biologically yours, Mr. Voss. 99.9% certainty." The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian stared at the paper in his hands like it contained secrets to the universe. Lena watched his face, saw the disbelief and shock and something else, something that looked almost like joy, buried so deep he probably didn't recognize it himself. "That's not possible," he said, but his voice held no conviction. "It's extremely rare," Dr. Chen acknowledged, "but not impossible. Sometimes, despite significant damage and poor prognosis, viable sperm can still be produced. The odds are astronomically low, but as you can see, not zero." "How low?" "Less than 1%. Functionally, you were correctly told you were infertile. This," she gestured toward Lena, "is a statistical anomaly, a miracle, if you believe in such things." Adrian set down the paper and stood, walking to the windows. His back was rigid, every line of his body screaming tension. Dr. Chen looked at Lena. "Are you all right, Mrs. Voss?" Lena didn't know how to answer that. She was pregnant with the child of a man she barely knew, a man who'd bought her like property and controlled her life with cold precision. But that same man had just learned he could have something he'd been told was impossible, and the look on his face before he'd turned away had been vulnerable enough to crack her heart. "I'm fine," she lied. After Dr. Chen left, Lena sat alone in the living room, listening to the silence. Adrian hadn't moved from the window. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, he spoke. "I never thought I'd have this. A child? A family." He turned, and his eyes were raw. "I made peace with dying alone a long time ago. Convinced myself it was better that way. Cleaner, less complicated. No one to worry about, no one to protect, no one to disappoint. And now everything I thought I knew is wrong." Adrian moved toward her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his movements weren't controlled and predatory. They were uncertain, almost hesitant. "You're carrying my child, a child that shouldn't exist but does, and I don't know what to do with that." "We figure it out," Lena said, echoing her words from weeks ago. Together, Adrian stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the storm in his eyes. I'm not good at this. At being human, at caring about things, at letting people in. I know. But I want to try. He actually knelt in front of her, and the gesture was so unexpected that Lena's breath caught. For you, for the baby, I want to try. Lena reached out and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm. Then we'll try together. His hand covered hers, warm and solid and real. And for the first time since she'd signed that contract, Lena thought maybe, just maybe, this could turn into something more than a business arrangement. They stayed like that for a long time, two damaged people finding their way towards something neither had thought possible. But trying didn't erase the danger that circled them like sharks smelling blood in the water. The next morning, Adrian increased her security detail from 2 guards to 4, and when Lena protested, he showed her a photograph that made her stomach turn. It was her, taken from across the street while she'd been leaving the foundation office. Someone had drawn a red X over her face. Marcus Kane sent this yesterday, Adrian said, his voice flat in that way that meant he was furious, along with a message congratulating me on my impending fatherhood. Lena's hands shook as she held the photograph. He knows. He knows everything. Medical records, foundation work schedule, your mother's treatment status. Adrian took the photo back and his jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. He's been watching us for weeks, maybe longer, waiting for the right moment to strike. What does he want? What he's always wanted. To destroy me. Adrian moved to his desk, pulled out a file thick with documents. Kane built his empire on weapons trafficking and extortion. When I cut him out, I didn't just take his business partner. I took his reputation, his connections, his ability to operate. He spent 5 years rebuilding from nothing. Now he thinks he's found my weakness. Me. You. The baby. Both. Adrian's eyes met hers, and they were cold again. That brief vulnerability from last night locked away behind walls of steel. He'll use anything he can to hurt me. Lena thought about the life growing inside her, barely bigger than a poppy seed, but already a target. So what do? We prepare for war. The penthouse transformed over the next 48 hours. Security systems that were already excessive became suffocating. Cameras in every room except the bathrooms, motion sensors on the windows, armed guards rotating shifts every 6 hours. Adrian brought in a security specialist named Victor, a mountain of a man with a Russian accent and eyes that had seen too much violence, who evaluated every aspect of Lena's daily routine and found it wanting. She's exposed here, Victor said, gesturing at the foundation office layout on his tablet. 3 entry points, minimal security, no panic room. If someone wants to take her, this is where they'll try. Then we move the office, Adrian said. You can't just move an entire office because I might be in danger. Lena looked between them, frustration building. People depend on that foundation. The work doesn't stop because you're paranoid. I'm not paranoid. I'm realistic. Adrian's tone allowed no argument. Victor, arrange for the foundation to relocate to the Voss Tower. Top floor next to my office. Full security integration. That'll take weeks. You have 72 hours. Victor nodded and left. Lena wanted to throw something. You can't keep doing this, she said when they were alone. Controlling every aspect of my life, making decisions without consulting me. I'm keeping you alive. You're suffocating me. Lena stood, and the room spun slightly. Morning sickness, or maybe just rage. I agreed to marry you. I agreed to your rules, but I didn't agree to become a prisoner. You became a prisoner the moment Kane decided you were leverage. Adrian moved closer, and his presence filled the space between them like a physical force. You think I want this? You think I enjoy turning our home into a fortress? I think you enjoy control more than you care about how it affects other people. The words hit harder than she'd intended, and she saw him flinch. For a moment, his mask cracked enough that she saw the man underneath, tired, scared, holding everything together through sheer force of will. You're right, he said quietly. I do. Control is the only thing that's kept me alive this long. But I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because losing you would... He stopped, jaw clenching. It would be unacceptable. Unacceptable? That's the word you use? Not difficult, not painful. Unacceptable. I don't know how to talk about this. Adrian's voice roughened. I don't have the vocabulary for what I'm feeling. I never learned it. Lena felt her anger deflate like a punctured balloon. She remembered what he'd said last night, about making peace with dying alone, about not knowing how to be human. He wasn't lying. He really didn't know how to articulate fear or care or whatever emotion was driving him to turn their lives into a military operation. Then learn, she said, softer now, because this baby is going to need a father who can say more than unacceptable when things get hard. Adrian stared at her and something shifted in his expression. Teach me. What? Teach me how to talk about this. About feelings, emotions, whatever you want to call them. He looked uncomfortable even saying the words, like they tasted foreign in his mouth. You're right. The baby will need better than what I know how to give. So teach me. It was such an unexpected request that Lena didn't know how to respond at first. This man who controlled empires and inspired fear in hardened criminals was asking her, a college dropout who'd spent the last 6 months scraping by, to teach him how to be human. Okay, she said finally, but you have to actually try. No hiding behind cold logic or business terminology. I'll try. Starting now. Lena took a breath. Tell me how you feel about the baby. Not what you think, not what's logical, how you feel. Adrian's discomfort was almost painful to watch. He stood rigid, hands clenched at his sides, jaw working like the words were being physically pulled from him. Terrified, he said finally. I'm terrified I'll be a terrible father, that I'll damage them the way I was damaged, that they'll grow up scared of me. The honesty hit Lena like a wave. What else? Angry. His voice was raw now. At Cain for putting you in danger, at myself for letting this happen, at the universe for giving me something I can't protect. And Adrian's eyes met hers, and they were storm-dark and vulnerable. Grateful. I'm grateful that something good came out of that nightmare of a wedding night, that I get to have this, even if I don't deserve it. Lena crossed the space between them and took his hand. His fingers were cold. You do deserve it. Maybe not the way it happened, but you deserve to be a father, to have a family. I don't know how to be soft, Adrian said, how to be gentle. Everything in my life requires hardness, requires edges sharp enough to cut. Then you learn that too. Lena squeezed his hand. With me, with the baby. You practice being soft in the spaces where it's safe. And if I fail, then you try again. She smiled, and it felt real for the first time in days. That's what being human is. Failing and trying again. Over and over until you get it right. Adrian pulled her closer, and his arms wrapped around her with a care that contradicted everything she knew about him. He held her like she was made of glass, like one wrong move would shatter her. It wasn't comfortable. He was too tense, too careful, but it was trying, and that mattered more. I won't let Cain hurt you, he said against her hair. Whatever it takes. Lena believed him. That was the terrifying part. She absolutely believed that Adrian would burn the world down to keep her safe. The Foundation moved to Voss Tower within the 72 hours Victor had been given. Lena tried not to think about how many strings Adrian had pulled, how many people he'd intimidated or bribed to make it happen that fast. The new office was 3 times the size of the old one, with windows overlooking the city and security so tight that even the cleaning staff needed background checks. Her coworkers adapted with the kind of resigned efficiency that suggested they were used to Adrian Voss reshaping reality to his preferences. Miss Reeves, whose first name was apparently Barbara, cornered Lena on the first day in the new space. So, Barbara said, adjusting her glasses. You're pregnant. Lena froze. How did you... Please, I have 3 kids. I know the signs. Barbara's expression softened. Also, Mr. Voss had us all sign additional ND, as this morning that specifically mentioned protecting family privacy. He's not exactly subtle. He's trying. Is he? Barbara studied her with the kind of shrewd assessment that made Lena remember this woman had survived years working for Adrian. Or is he doing what he always does, controlling everything to feel safe? Both, maybe. Lena sat at her new desk, which was twice as large as the old one. He's complicated. Men like Adrian Voss are always complicated. It's how they justify the things they do. Barbara paused. But for what it's worth, I've never seen him care about anything the way he cares about keeping you safe. That's new. After Barbara left, Lena tried to focus on work. There were grant applications to review, research proposals to evaluate, desperate people waiting for answers that might save their lives. But concentration was impossible when her stomach was churning and her mind kept circling back to Adrian's admission, "I'm terrified I'll be a terrible father." Her phone buzzed with a text from him. "How are you feeling?" She typed back, nauseous, trapped, grateful, all at once. His response came quickly. "Same. Minus the nauseous part." Despite everything, Lena smiled. The attack came 2 weeks later when she'd almost convinced herself that maybe Kane was just posturing, that the increased security was overkill. She was leaving the building with her security detail. 4 men who moved like trained soldiers because they were trained soldiers. Victor had insisted on using the parking garage instead of the front entrance, citing better security protocols. Lena had stopped arguing about these things. It wasn't worth the energy. The elevator descended smoothly until it didn't. The lights flickered, died, and the car jerked to a halt between floors. Lena's first thought was power failure, but then she saw her lead guard, a man named Roberts, draw his weapon with smooth efficiency. "Get behind me," he said quietly. "What's happening?" "Elevator override. Someone's accessed the building's security system." Roberts spoke into his radio, voice clipped and professional. "Victor, we have a situation. Elevator C is compromised. Need immediate backup and system lockdown." The radio crackled with static, then Victor's accented voice. 3 minutes. Hold position. 3 minutes. Lena pressed against the elevator wall and felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The baby. She needed to protect the baby. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, still flat but containing something precious and vulnerable. Above them, something scraped metal against metal. Roberts looked up, gun trained on the emergency hatch. "They're coming through the top," he said to the other guards. "Defensive positions." It happened fast after that. The hatch burst open, and someone dropped smoke grenades that filled the elevator with thick gray fog. Lena couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Hands grabbed her, not Roberts's hands, strangers' hands, and pulled her toward the hatch. She fought, kicked, screamed, clawed at whoever was holding her. But they were stronger, trained, prepared for resistance. Someone pressed something against her neck, a needle, she realized too late, and the world went soft and distant. The last thing she heard before consciousness slipped away was gunfire and Victor's voice screaming her name. She woke in darkness that smelled like mold and rust. Her head pounded, and when she tried to move, she discovered her hands were zip-tied behind her back. Panic flooded her system. The baby, what about the baby? Had the drugs hurt the baby? But she forced it down. Panic wouldn't help. "You're awake." The voice came from somewhere to her left, male and unfamiliar. "Good. Mr. Kane will be pleased." Lena's eyes adjusted slowly. She was in what looked like an old warehouse, all exposed pipes and crumbling concrete. The man watching her was in his 40s, nondescript in that way that suggested professional criminal. He held a gun loosely, like it was an extension of his hand. "Where am I?" Her voice came out hoarse. "Somewhere your husband will never find you, at least not in time." The man smiled, and it was cold. "Mr. Kane wants to have a conversation with you before we proceed to the next phase." "Next phase? You'll see." The door opened, and Marcus Kane walked in like he owned the place. He probably did. Kane was younger than Lena had expected. Mid-40s, attractive in a way that wealth and power often made men attractive. He wore an expensive suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Voss," he said, pulling up a chair to sit across from her. "I apologize for the accommodations. Not exactly what you're used to, I imagine." "What do you want?" "Direct. I like that." Kane leaned back, studying her like she was a specimen under glass. "I want Adrian to suffer. And you, his pregnant wife, carrying the miracle child he never thought he'd have. You're the perfect tool for that suffering." Lena's stomach turned. "He'll kill you for this. He'll try. But first, he'll have to choose." Kane pulled out his phone, showed her a photograph of her mother sleeping peacefully in her Johns Hopkins room. "You see, Adrian's not the only one who can access medical records. Your mother's recovery has been remarkable. 68% improvement, the doctors say. She could live another 20 years with proper care." "Don't." The word came out as a plea. "I won't. Not if Adrian gives me what I want." Kane put away the phone. Here's how this works. Adrian has 12 hours to transfer complete control of his import business back to me, along with $50 million in compensation for 5 years of lost revenue. If he agrees, you go home safe, your mother continues her treatment, and everyone lives happily ever after. And if he doesn't? Kane's smile widened. Then I make sure the miracle child never takes a first breath, and your mother's life support gets disconnected by tragic malfunction. Adrian loses everything that matters to him, and I get the satisfaction of watching him break. Lena felt ice flood her veins. You're insane. I'm practical. Adrian destroyed my life. Now I destroy his. Kane stood, brushing invisible lint from his suit. The clock starts now, 12 hours. Let's see if Adrian Voss cares more about his pride or his family. He left, and Lena was alone with the guard and her racing thoughts. 12 hours. Adrian would come for her. She knew that with absolute certainty. But would he give in to Kane's demands? Would he sacrifice his business, his empire, everything he'd built? And more importantly, if he did, would Kane actually let them go? Or was this just an elaborate setup to destroy Adrian and kill her anyway? She tested the zip ties, but they were tight and professional. Her wrists were already going numb. The guard watched her with casual disinterest, like she was a job he'd done 1,000 times before. How long have you worked for Kane? She asked, more to distract herself than because she cared. Long enough. Does he pay well? Better than talking to hostages. The guard's expression didn't change. Save your energy. You're going to need it. Lena fell silent, her mind working through possibilities. Adrian had resources, Victor, James, an entire security apparatus, but Kane had clearly planned this carefully, probably had countermeasures in place for every obvious move. The warehouse location was deliberately obscure, the kind of place that wouldn't show up on property records or security footage. Hours passed. Lena's wrists throbbed, and her back ached from sitting in one position. The baby, she kept thinking about the baby, praying that the sedatives they'd used weren't harmful, that stress wouldn't trigger a miscarriage. Dr. Chen had said the pregnancy was healthy, resilient. She had to believe that was still true. The guard's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression shifted to something alert and tense. Boss says we're moving up the timeline, he said into his radio. Voss found the location faster than expected. Initiate Protocol 7. Protocol 7. That sounded bad. The guard moved toward Lena, and she saw the needle in his hand. Sorry about this. Just making sure you sleep through the fireworks. Wait. But he was already pressing the needle to her neck, and darkness swallowed her whole again. This time when she woke, everything was different. She was still in the warehouse, but now there were voices, shouting, gunfire, the sound of something exploding in the distance. Her hands were free, and someone had cut the zip ties. She tried to sit up, and the world spun violently. Easy! Victor's face appeared above her, grim and blood-stained. Don't move too fast. You've been drugged twice in 6 hours. Adrian is handling Kane. We need to get you out before this place becomes a war zone. Victor lifted her with surprising gentleness for a man his size. Can you walk? I think so. She couldn't, not really. Her legs were rubber, and the nausea was back with a vengeance. Victor ended up carrying her through corridors that echoed with violence, past bodies she didn't look at too closely, toward an exit that seemed impossibly far away. They made it halfway before Kane's voice stopped them. Victor! Kane emerged from a side room, and he had a gun pointed directly at Lena's head. Put her down, or I put a bullet through her brain right now. Victor froze. Lena felt his muscles tense, calculating odds and angles and whether he could move fast enough to matter. Don't, she whispered. He'll shoot. Smart girl. Kane moved closer, and his composure from earlier was gone, replaced by something manic and desperate. Your husband killed 12 of my men and burned down my operations. He's taking everything from me again, so I'm taking what matters to him. Kane. Adrian's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He appeared at the corridor's other end, gun drawn, and his face was cold enough to freeze blood. Let her go. Or what? You'll kill me? Kane laughed, and it sounded unhinged. You're going to do that anyway. At least this way I take something with me. You kill her, and I don't make it quick. Adrian moved closer, and every step radiated controlled violence. You kill my child, and I make sure you spend days dying, begging for death while I take you apart piece by piece. Empty threats. Ask the men in the East Wing if I make empty threats. Ask them how it felt when I broke every bone in their hands before I killed them. Adrian's voice never rose, but the promise of violence underneath was absolute. This is your last chance. Lower the gun, walk away, and I let you run. Keep pointing it at my wife, and I show you what real suffering looks like. Kane's hand trembled, sweat beaded on his forehead. He was trapped and he knew it. Kill Lena and die slowly, or run and live another day. The gun lowered by inches. Adrian moved fast, faster than Lena had ever seen anyone move. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next he had Kane on the ground with a gun pressed to the back of his skull. Victor, get Lena out, Adrian said without looking away from Kane. Now. Victor didn't need to be told twice. He carried Lena toward the exit, and she looked back just once to see Adrian kneeling over Kane with an expression that promised death. The last thing she heard before Victor got her outside was a single gunshot. They took her straight to Dr. Chen, who examined her with gentle efficiency despite Lena's protests that she was fine. The baby was fine. Somehow, miraculously, the drugs and stress hadn't caused any damage. Lena cried with relief when Dr. Chen confirmed it, and she didn't care that Victor saw. Adrian arrived 3 hours later, blood on his clothes and murder still in his eyes. He didn't say anything, just pulled Lena into his arms and held her tight enough to hurt. "Kane?" she asked against his shoulder. "Dead. Are you okay?" "I killed 15 men today." His voice was flat, empty. "I tortured one of them for information. I burned down a building with 3 of Kane's associates still inside, and all I feel is relief that you're safe." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands gentle despite the violence they'd just committed. "What does that make me?" "Human," Lena said. "Flawed and dangerous and human." Adrian's expression cracked, and for a moment she saw the fear underneath, not fear of Kane or death or consequences, but fear that he was too broken to be the father their child deserved. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly, "that I'll teach them to be like me, cold, violent, unable to connect." "Then we make sure you don't." Lena took his blood-stained hands in hers. "We teach them together. We show them how to be strong without being cruel, how to protect without destroying." "I don't know if I can." "You're already trying. That's more than most people do." She squeezed his hands. "The man who killed to save me today? He's also the man who held me like I was precious. Both of those men are you, and our child will know both versions." Adrian closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something had shifted. The mask was still there. It would probably always be there, built too deep to fully remove. But underneath, she saw the man who was trying to be better. "I'm not going to be good at this," he said. "I know. I'm going to make mistakes, probably a lot of them. So will I. But I'll try." His hands moved to her stomach, pressing gently against where their child grew. "For both of you, I'll try." It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't poetry or romance or any of the things Lena had once imagined a partner would say. But it was real, and it was his, and somehow that made it matter more. They stood like that for a long time, 2 damaged people who'd made something new together, while around them the city continued its endless cycle of light and darkness. The aftermath of Kane's death rippled through Adrian's world like a stone thrown into still water. Police came, asked questions with the kind of careful neutrality that suggested they knew better than to push too hard. Adrian's lawyers handled most of it: self-defense, protection of family, a clear threat neutralized. The bodies in the warehouse became statistics in reports that would eventually be filed away and forgotten. But Lena couldn't forget. She kept seeing Kane's face in those final moments, the desperation and madness in his eyes. She kept hearing the gunshot, kept wondering what exactly Adrian had done before pulling the trigger. She asked him 3 days later when they were alone in the penthouse and the silence between them had grown heavy with unspoken things. "Did you make him suffer?" Adrian was at his desk, reviewing documents that probably involved cleaning up the mess Kane had left behind. He looked up, and his expression was carefully neutral. "Does it matter?" "Yes." He set down his pen, studying her face like he was trying to determine the right answer. Finally, he said, "I shot him in the head, clean, quick. He died instantly." "But you wanted to make him suffer." I wanted to take him apart with my bare hands, Adrian said, and there was no emotion in his voice. I wanted him to feel every bit of fear you felt, every moment of pain, but that would have taken time we didn't have, and I needed to get to you. Lena absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. So you chose me over revenge. I chose getting you to safety over the satisfaction of watching him beg. Adrian stood, moving to the window, his usual position when conversations got difficult. Don't make it more noble than it is. I'm not. I'm just trying to understand who you are. I'm the man who killed 15 people yesterday and slept fine last night. He turned to face her. I'm the man who would do it again tomorrow if it meant keeping you safe. That's who I am. If you're looking for redemption or moral complexity, you're going to be disappointed. I'm not looking for redemption. Lena stood, moving closer to him. I'm looking for honesty. Which version of you is real? The one who kills without hesitation, or the one who's trying to learn how to be a father? Both. Adrian's jaw clenched. That's what I keep trying to tell you. I'm not two different people. I'm one person who contains all of it. The violence, the control, the rare moments when I let myself feel something other than cold calculation. You can't separate them and keep just the parts you like. I don't want to separate them. Lena reached for his hand and he let her take it. I want to understand how they fit together, because our child is going to inherit pieces of both of us, and I need to know what that means. Adrian looked down at their joined hands, and something complicated moved across his face. It means they'll be strong. Probably too strong. They'll know how to survive in a world that wants to eat them alive. He paused. But maybe, if we're careful, they'll also know how to be gentle. How to care about things without letting that caring become weakness. Caring isn't weakness. In my world, it is. Adrian's thumb moved against her palm, the gesture unconscious and gentle. Every person you care about is leverage someone can use against you. Every attachment is a potential wound. That's not pessimism, it's reality. Then we change your world. Lena squeezed his hand. We build something different for our child. Something where caring isn't a liability. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's probably impossible. She smiled, and it felt fragile. But we're already doing impossible things. You're proof of that. Adrian's expression shifted, confusion replacing the careful neutrality. What do you mean? You weren't supposed to be able to have children. Every doctor told you it was impossible, but here we are. Lena moved his hand to her stomach, which was just starting to show a slight curve. Maybe impossible just means it hasn't happened yet. He stared at where his hand rested, and Lena saw something break open in his eyes. Wonder mixed with fear, mixed with something that might have been hope. I felt them move yesterday, she said quietly. Just a flutter, barely there. But I felt it. Adrian's hand pressed more firmly. I don't feel anything. It's too early for you to feel it from the outside. But it's there, growing, real. She covered his hand with hers. We made a person, Adrian. A whole person who's going to have your eyes, and maybe my stubbornness, and their own thoughts and dreams, and… Stop. His voice cracked. Just stop. Why? Because I can't. He pulled his hand away, and the loss of contact felt physical. Every time I let myself think about it, about them, I remember all the ways this can go wrong. Complications during birth, genetic problems, birth defects. And if they survive all of that, they'll grow up with me as a father, and that's its own kind of damage. You're catastrophizing. I'm being realistic. Adrian moved away from her, putting distance between them. My father was a violent drunk who beat my mother until she stopped fighting back. I learned early that love meant pain, that caring meant vulnerability, that the only way to survive was to be harder than everyone else. What if I do that to our child? What if, despite everything I'm trying, I still end up hurting them? Lena had known Adrian's childhood was bad. You didn't develop his particular brand of control issues from a happy upbringing, but hearing it stated so plainly made her chest ache. You won't, she said. You can't know that. I can know that you're aware of the pattern, that you're actively trying to break it. That's more than most people do. Lena followed him, refusing to let him retreat completely. Your father probably never questioned whether he was a good parent. You're already better than him just by worrying about it. That's a low bar. It's a starting point. She caught his arm, made him look at her. Listen to me. You're not going to be a perfect father. You're going to make mistakes. But you're also going to love this child fiercely, protect them absolutely, and teach them how to be strong. That's not nothing. Adrian's expression was raw, stripped of the usual masks. What if my version of love is too damaged to be useful? Then we supplement it with my version. Between the two of us, maybe we'll manage something functional. Lena smiled, trying to lighten the weight of the conversation. Besides, all parents damage their kids a little. It's practically a requirement. He almost smiled at that. Almost. You're too optimistic. And you're too pessimistic. We balance each other out. They stood like that for a moment, close but not touching. The space between them filled with all the things neither knew how to say. Finally, Adrian spoke. I want to learn, he said quietly, about pregnancy, about babies, about what we're supposed to do. I don't want to be useless when they arrive. You won't be useless. I don't know how to change a diaper. I don't know what babies eat or when they sleep or how to tell if they're sick. Adrian's frustration was evident. I know how to run 17 companies and negotiate hostile takeovers and kill someone 20 different ways. None of that translates to parenthood. Then we learn together. Lena pulled out her phone, opened the browser. Look, parenting classes. Starts next week, runs for 8 sessions. We could go. Adrian stared at the screen like she'd suggested they join the circus. You want me to sit in a room with strangers and practice diaper changes on a plastic doll? Yes. Absolutely not. Adrian, I employ people for this. We'll hire a nanny, someone trained and experienced who knows what they're doing. We'll probably hire a nanny eventually, Lena agreed, but you still need to know how to take care of your own child. What if something happens and the nanny's not there? What if it's just you and the baby and they're screaming and you have no idea why? Adrian's expression suggested this scenario was his personal nightmare. Then I call someone who does know. Or you could learn so you don't have to. Lena pulled up another page. Look, this one is specifically for first-time parents. It covers everything from feeding to sleep schedules to recognizing warning signs of illness. It's practical information you'll actually need. I'll read a book. Books don't teach you how it feels to hold a newborn, how to support their head or burp them or get them to stop crying at 3 a.m. Lena caught his hand again. Please, do this with me. Not because you have to, but because I don't want to do it alone. That got through his defenses. Adrian's expression shifted, some of the resistance draining away. You're manipulating me. I'm being honest. I'm terrified too. I don't know what I'm doing either. Lena's voice softened. But if we're both there, stumbling through it together, maybe it'll be less scary. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. Fine. We'll go to one class. If it's useless, we're done. Deal. The first parenting class was exactly as awkward as Adrian had feared, and Lena had secretly expected. They walked into a community center that smelled like coffee and old carpet, and were immediately surrounded by couples who looked wholesome and excited and nothing like them. The instructor was a woman named Patricia, who had the kind of aggressively cheerful energy that made Adrian visibly uncomfortable. She welcomed them with enthusiasm that suggested she either didn't know who Adrian Voss was or didn't care. Everyone find a spot on the floor, Patricia called out. We'll start with some introductory exercises to get comfortable with each other. Adrian looked at the floor, then at Lena, his expression clearly saying this was a terrible idea. But he sat down next to her, his movements stiff and precise. Let's go around the room, Patricia continued. Share your name, how far along you are, and one thing you're excited about regarding parenthood. The other couples went first. Names Lena immediately forgot. Pregnancies ranging from 12 weeks to 35. Excitement about first kicks and nursery decorating and baby showers. Normal, happy, uncomplicated excitement. Then it was their turn. I'm Lena, she said. This is Adrian. We're about 12 weeks along, and I'm excited about... She trailed off, trying to find something that didn't sound insane. Meeting the person we made accidentally while drugged seemed inappropriate. I'm excited about seeing who they become. Patricia beamed. Beautiful. And Adrian? Adrian looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. I'm present. A few people laughed, thinking it was a joke. Lena elbowed him. I'm concerned about not damaging them, Adrian amended, his tone suggesting this was physically painful to admit. And I want to learn how to minimize that damage. The laughter stopped. Patricia's smile became more genuine, less performative. That's honest. I appreciate that. A lot of parents come in here pretending they have it all figured out. The ones who admit they're scared usually end up being the best parents. After introductions, they practiced basic holds with weighted dolls that were supposed to simulate newborns. Adrian approached it like a military exercise, following Patricia's instructions with precise attention to detail. His hands were gentle despite their size, supporting the doll's head carefully. "You're a natural," Patricia said, stopping by to observe. Adrian looked skeptical. "It's a plastic doll." "Yes, but you're treating it like it's fragile and important. That's the right instinct." Patricia adjusted his arm slightly. "When the real baby comes, your body will remember this. Muscle memory is powerful." Lena watched him practice, saw the concentration on his face, and felt something warm bloom in her chest. He looked ridiculous. This dangerous man who'd killed 15 people last week, now cradling a fake baby with the intensity he usually reserved for business negotiations. But he was trying, and that mattered. They learned about diaper changes next. Adrian approached this with the same methodical precision, following each step exactly as demonstrated. When it was Lena's turn, she fumbled the fasteners and the diaper ended up crooked. "How are you worse at this than I am?" Adrian asked, and there was almost amusement in his voice. "I don't practice killing people for precision training," Lena shot back. "That's not—" He stopped, seeing her grin. "You're joking." "I'm joking." She bumped his shoulder. "But seriously, how are you good at this?" "It's just following instructions." Adrian refastened the diaper on his doll, and it was perfect. Nothing complicated about it. Wait until you're doing it on a squirming, screaming baby at 2 a.m. while running on no sleep. Then I'll adapt. He said it with such certainty that Lena almost believed him. They went to all 8 classes. Adrian complained before every single one, but he showed up on time and participated and slowly became less rigid around the other couples. By the 4th week, he was even answering questions when other parents asked about his experience, though his answers were usually brutally honest in ways that made people uncomfortable. "How are you preparing your home for the baby?" someone asked during week 5. "Security upgrades," Adrian said. "Bulletproof glass on the nursery windows, panic room access, armed guards on every floor." Silence. "Also outlet covers," Lena added quickly, "and cabinet locks, the normal stuff." But the security upgrades were real, and they were extensive. Adrian transformed one of the penthouse's spare rooms into a nursery that looked like a luxury fortress. The crib was custom-made from materials that could apparently withstand significant impact. The walls were reinforced. The windows were bulletproof, as he'd mentioned. "This is insane," Lena said, watching workers install what looked like a military-grade security system. "This is necessary." Adrian reviewed blueprints with Victor, pointing out potential vulnerabilities. "Kane is dead, but he wasn't my only enemy. People will see the baby as leverage. We need to be prepared. We also need the baby to have a somewhat normal childhood. Normal is a luxury we can't afford." They had this argument approximately once a week, with variations. Adrian wanted complete security lockdown. Lena wanted their child to experience things like parks and playgrounds and normalcy. They never reached a resolution, just an exhausted stalemate that usually ended with Adrian making a small concession and Lena accepting it wouldn't be enough. But there were good moments, too. Lena hit 16 weeks, and her morning sickness finally eased. She started showing properly, her stomach rounding in a way that made the pregnancy undeniably real. Adrian would sometimes just stare at her belly with an expression she couldn't quite read, part wonder, part fear, part something else. "Can I?" he asked one evening, gesturing toward her stomach. "You don't have to ask permission." "Yes, I do." He moved closer but didn't touch. "This is your body. You get to decide who touches it and when." Lena took his hand and placed it where the baby had been kicking all afternoon. "There. Feel that?" Adrian's eyes widened. "That's them?" "That's them." She pressed his hand more firmly. "They've been active today." They stood like that for several minutes, Adrian's hand on her stomach, feeling their child move. His expression cycled through disbelief, awe, and something that looked like grief. "What's wrong?" Lena asked. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's—" He struggled to find words. "I never thought I'd have this. Any of this. And now that it's happening, I keep waiting for it to be taken away." "It won't be." "You can't promise that. I can promise I'll fight like hell to make sure it stays. Lena covered his hand with hers. We both will. That has to count for something. At 20 weeks, they went for the anatomy scan. Dr. Chen walked them through every measurement, every structure, explaining what she was looking at in terms Lena only half understood. The baby was healthy, growing perfectly. No abnormalities detected. Do you want to know the sex? Dr. Chen asked. Lena looked at Adrian. They'd discussed this beforehand, couldn't come to a consensus. She wanted to know, wanted to start imagining the specific person their child would become. Adrian wanted to wait, said knowing made it more real, and real meant more vulnerable. Yes, Lena said, making the decision for both of them. We want to know. Dr. Chen smiled. It's a girl. A girl. Lena felt tears prick her eyes, and she didn't bother hiding them. A daughter. They were having a daughter. Adrian had gone completely still beside her, his hand gripping hers tight enough to hurt. A girl, he repeated, his voice barely audible. A girl, Dr. Chen confirmed. Healthy, active, measuring right on track. Congratulations. After the appointment, they sat in Adrian's car in the parking garage, neither of them moving to leave. Lena watched him process, saw the wheels turning behind his eyes. Talk to me, she said. I don't know how to raise a girl. Adrian stared straight ahead. I barely know how to raise a child in general, but a girl. I don't know anything about girls. You knew me. I married you for a business arrangement and got you pregnant by accident. That's not knowing you, that's circumstance. He finally looked at her. What if I'm too hard on her? What if I teach her that the only way to survive is to be cold and controlled? What if she grows up afraid of me? Then we make sure that doesn't happen. Lena squeezed his hand. We teach her to be strong, but not cruel. Independent, but not isolated. We show her that being soft isn't the same as being weak. I don't know how to be soft. You're learning, she smiled. You ask permission to touch my stomach. You go to parenting classes even though you hate them. You're building a nursery that's probably safer than most government facilities. You care, Adrian. You just express it differently than other people. Adrian was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I want her to be better than me. She will be, because she'll have both of us. Lena leaned against his shoulder. She'll have your strength and my optimism, your intelligence and my empathy. She'll be her own person, but she'll have the best parts of both of us. And the worst parts. Those too. But we'll work with what we've got. They sat there until the parking garage lights started turning off. Automatic sensors assuming everyone had gone home. Then Adrian finally started the car and drove them back to the penthouse, where a nursery waited to be filled with all the complicated love they were learning how to build. At 24 weeks, Lena's mother came to visit. Grace Carter had put on weight, regained color in her face, and looked more alive than she had in over a year. Johns Hopkins had declared her in remission, a word that felt like a miracle every time Lena heard it. Grace walked into the penthouse and stopped, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive furniture and overwhelming wealth. So this is how the other half lives, she said, turning to Lena with raised eyebrows. It's temporary, Lena said automatically, even though 6 months had passed and temporary was starting to feel permanent. Temporary. Grace's tone suggested she didn't believe that for a second. You married one of the most powerful men in the city, you're 6 months pregnant with his child, and you think this is temporary? The contract was for a year. Sweetheart, contracts change. Situations evolve. Grace moved to the windows, looking out at the city below. Where is he, your husband? In his office, working. Lena gestured toward the upper floor. He knew you were coming. He's giving us space. How thoughtful. Grace turned, and her expression was complicated. Gratitude mixed with wariness, mixed with maternal concern. Tell me the truth, Lena. Are you happy? The question caught Lena off guard. Was she happy? She was pregnant with a child she hadn't planned, married to a man who'd bought her like property, living in a gilded cage with security that would make prisons jealous. But she was also doing meaningful work. Her mother was alive, and Adrian was trying, really trying, to be better than what his past had made him. I don't know if happy is the right word, Lena said honestly, but I'm not miserable. And I think this could become something good, if we both keep trying. You love him. Grace said it as a statement, not a question. I don't know, maybe. It's complicated. Love usually is. Grace moved closer, taking Lena's hands. I'm not going to lecture you about choices or consequences. You saved my life with the choice you made, and I'll be grateful for that until I die. But I need to know, does he treat you well? Does he respect you? Lena thought about Adrian asking permission to touch her stomach, about him going to parenting classes he hated, about the way he'd killed 15 people to get her back. He's trying to. He doesn't always know how, but he's trying. That's something. Grace squeezed her hands. And the baby? Are you excited? Terrified, Lena admitted. But yes, excited too. It's a girl, by the way. We found out a month ago. Grace's face lit up. A granddaughter. Oh, Lena. She pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of the pregnant belly between them. She's going to be loved so much. I hope so. I know so. Grace pulled back. Now show me this fortress nursery I've heard about. I want to see what kind of room needs bulletproof windows. They spent the afternoon together, and Adrian stayed scarce until dinner. When he finally appeared, Grace studied him with the kind of thorough assessment only mothers could manage. Mr. Voss, she said. Mrs. Carter. Adrian's discomfort was visible. I hope the accommodations are acceptable. The accommodations are excessive, but I suppose that's your style. Grace gestured to the chair across from her. Sit. Let me look at the man who married my daughter. Adrian sat, and Lena had never seen him look so uncertain. This man who negotiated with criminals and ran an empire was nervous about dinner with her mother. I want to thank you, Grace said, for funding my treatment, for giving Lena opportunities she wouldn't have had otherwise, for keeping her safe when someone tried to hurt her. You don't need to thank me. Adrian's tone was careful. Lena and I have an arrangement. I'm fulfilling my part of it. Is that all this is? An arrangement? Grace's eyes were sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, you're building a nursery, going to parenting classes, and looking at my daughter like she's the only person in the room. That's more than an arrangement. Adrian's jaw tightened. Mrs. Carter, Grace. Call me Grace. She leaned forward. I'm not here to interrogate you or make you uncomfortable. I just want to understand what my daughter is walking into, what kind of life she's building with you. I don't know what kind of life we're building, Adrian said honestly. I'm making it up as I go, trying not to destroy everything I touch. That's more self-awareness than most men have. Grace smiled slightly. Do you love her? The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Lena held her breath, waiting for Adrian's answer, waiting to hear if he even knew what love was, let alone whether he felt it. I don't know what love is supposed to feel like, Adrian said finally, but I know that keeping her safe matters more than anything else in my life. I know that the thought of losing her makes me willing to do things I wouldn't do for anyone else. I know that she's teaching me how to be human again, and I'm grateful for that even when it's uncomfortable. That sounds like love to me, Grace said gently. It sounds like dependence. Love and dependence aren't mutually exclusive. Grace reached across the table, and to Lena's surprise, Adrian let her take his hand. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to keep showing up and trying. That's all any of us can do. Adrian looked at Grace's hand covering his, and something in his expression softened. I'll take care of them. Both of them. Whatever it takes. I know you will. Grace released his hand. Now someone promised me dinner, and I'm starving. They ate together, and the conversation gradually became less tense. Grace told stories about Lena's childhood, the kind of embarrassing anecdotes mothers specialized in. Adrian listened with genuine interest, asking questions about the person Lena had been before he'd met her. She was stubborn even as a baby, Grace said, refused to sleep on any schedule, wanted things her way, or not at all. That hasn't changed, Adrian said, and there was almost warmth in his voice. I'm right here, Lena protested. We know. Grace and Adrian said it at the same time, then looked at each other with expressions that suggested a temporary alliance had formed. After dinner, Grace hugged Lena goodbye at the door. He's more than I expected, she whispered. Damaged, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But trying, that counts for a lot. I know. And Lena? Whatever happens with the contract, with the arrangement, follow your heart. Not your fear, not your gratitude. Your heart. Grace kissed her forehead. You deserve to be happy. After her mother left, Lena found Adrian on the roof, a space she'd only discovered a week ago. He stood at the edge, looking out at the city lights, and for once he didn't have his phone or tablet or any connection to the empire he ran. "She likes you," Lena said, joining him. "She's being polite. She's being honest. My mother doesn't waste energy on politeness." Lena stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "What you said at dinner, about not knowing what love feels like, did you mean that?" "I've never loved anyone before." Adrian kept his eyes on the city. "My parents destroyed each other and called it love. Every relationship I've witnessed has been transactional or destructive or both. I don't have a template for what healthy love looks like." "Neither do I, really. My parents loved each other, but my dad died when I was 14. I don't remember enough to use them as a model." Lena turned to face him. "So maybe we figure it out together. Make our own template." Adrian finally looked at her, and his eyes held questions he didn't know how to ask. "What if we get it wrong? Then we try again. Keep trying until we get it right." She took his hand. "That's what you told me about being a father, remember? Failing and trying again until you figure it out? That was about diaper changes. The principle still applies." Adrian pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her with more confidence than they had months ago. He'd learned how to hold her, learned the right amount of pressure, where to put his hands, how to be gentle without being tentative. 7 more months, he said against her hair. "Then the contract expires, and you're free to leave." Lena's heart stuttered. She'd almost forgotten about the contract, about the arrangement that had started all of this. "Do you want me to leave?" "No." The answer came immediately. "But I want you to choose. Not because you're obligated, not because I'm paying for your mother's care, not because we're having a child together. I want you to choose to stay because you want to. And if I choose to leave, then I'll honor the contract, pay the settlement, maintain support for our daughter, step back and let you build whatever life you want." Adrian pulled back to look at her face. "But I'll ask you to stay. I'll ask you to give us, a real chance without contracts or obligations. Just 2 people trying to build something together." Lena searched his face, looking for the angle, the manipulation, the control. But all she saw was uncertainty and hope and fear, all the human emotions he was learning to express instead of hide. "Ask me again in 7 months," she said, "when the contract expires. Ask me then, and I'll give you an answer." That's not a no. It's not a yes either. It's a let's see where we are when we get there. She smiled. "Is that acceptable?" Adrian almost laughed. "You're using my word against me. I learned from the best." They stood on the roof as the city moved below them, 2 people who'd been brought together by desperation and circumstance, slowly discovering that maybe, just maybe, they'd found something worth keeping. The months that followed moved faster than Lena expected, and slower than Adrian seemed prepared for. Her belly grew until she couldn't see her feet anymore, until getting out of chairs required strategic planning and dignity became an optional luxury. Adrian watched this transformation with the kind of fascinated concern usually reserved for natural disasters, something powerful and inevitable that he had no ability to control. At 32 weeks, Lena woke at 3 a.m. to find Adrian sitting in the chair beside their bed, just watching her sleep. "That's creepy," she mumbled, still half asleep. "You were making a noise. I wanted to make sure you were breathing properly." "I'm pregnant, not dying." Lena struggled to sit up, and Adrian immediately moved to help her, his hands careful on her back. "What are you really doing?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Memorizing this, in case it's the only time I get to see it." "You think I'm going to leave?" "I think you should leave." He said it without inflection, like he was stating a business fact. "When the contract expires, you should take the settlement money, take our daughter, and build a life somewhere safe. Away from me and everything I bring with me." Lena was fully awake now. "Is this you pushing me away, or you genuinely believing that?" "Both." Adrian stood, moved to the window, his perpetual retreat position. "The more I learn about being a father, the more I realize how unqualified I am. I can't take her to playgrounds without security teams. I can't let her go to normal schools without putting a target on her back. Every friend she makes will need to be vetted. Every birthday party will be a security risk. That's not childhood, that's prison." "So you're planning to just, see her on weekends?" "I'm planning to make sure she has the option for normalcy." Adrian's reflection in the window looked tired. "You could move somewhere quiet. Change your names. I'd provide security from a distance, make sure you're both safe but not obviously connected to me. She could grow up without the weight of my reputation crushing her. Lena threw off the covers, a more complicated process than it used to be, and heaved herself out of bed. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's practical. It's you catastrophizing again. She waddled over to him, and the waddle undercut her attempt at dramatic confrontation, but she pushed forward anyway. You're planning to sacrifice your relationship with your daughter before she's even born because you're afraid of hypothetical future problems. They're not hypothetical. They're inevitable. Fine. Let's say they are. Let's say growing up as your daughter means security teams and vetted friends and all the complications you're worried about. Lena poked him in the chest. She'd also have a father who would burn the world down to keep her safe, who's learning how to change diapers even though he hates it, who's reading parenting books at 3 a.m. because he's terrified of getting it wrong. You think those things don't matter? I think they're not enough. They're more than a lot of kids get. Lena's voice softened. My dad died when I was 14. I would have given anything for more time with him, even complicated time, even difficult time. Your daughter deserves to know her father, Adrian, not some sanitized, distant version who sends money and stays away. The real version, flaws and all. Adrian finally turned from the window. What if the real version damages her? What if it doesn't? What if she grows up strong and smart and capable because she learned from someone who survived everything trying to destroy him? Lena took his hand. You keep acting like your damage is contagious, like just being near you will ruin her, but damage doesn't work that way. You're not toxic waste. You don't know that. I know you've been different with me than you are with everyone else. I know you're capable of gentleness even if you're uncomfortable with it. I know you're trying. She placed his hand on her belly, where their daughter was doing her nightly gymnastics routine. Feel that? She's strong because you're strong. She's a fighter because we're both fighters. That's not damage. That's inheritance. Adrian's hand pressed against where their daughter kicked, and his expression cracked open. I don't want to fail her. You won't. You'll make mistakes, but you won't fail. Lena covered his hand with hers. We're doing this together, remember? You, me, and her. A team. I'm not good at teams. You're learning. She smiled. You're getting better at a lot of things you thought you couldn't do. They stood like that until the baby stopped moving and Lena's back started aching. Adrian helped her back to bed, and this time when she fell asleep, he was lying beside her instead of watching from a chair. At 36 weeks, Lena's water broke during a foundation board meeting. 1 minute she was reviewing grant applications, the next she was standing in a puddle while 6 board members stared at her in horror. Get Adrian, she said to Barbara, who was already reaching for her phone. And call Dr. Chen, tell her we're coming. The next hour was chaos. Adrian appeared in the foundation office looking like someone had told him the world was ending, which from his perspective it probably was. Victor materialized with a medical bag that seemed excessive for a car ride. The security team cleared a path through the building like they were evacuating royalty. This is too early, Adrian said as they got into the car. His hands were shaking, actually shaking, and Lena had never seen him lose composure like this. You're not due for another month. Babies don't follow schedules. Lena breathed through a contraction that felt like her body was trying to turn itself inside out. Dr. Chen said 36 weeks is early but safe. The baby will be fine. You don't know that. I know panicking doesn't help. Another contraction hit, stronger this time. Focus, Adrian. I need you focused. He took a breath, and she watched him pull himself together through sheer force of will. The shaking stopped. His expression cleared. He became the version of himself that handled crises, cold, efficient, in control. What do you need? He asked. Your hand. And for you to tell me something distracting. Adrian took her hand, his grip solid and grounding. Like what? Anything. Tell me about your day. Tell me about work. Just talk so I can focus on something other than the fact that I'm about to push a human out of my body. So Adrian talked. He told her about a merger negotiation that had gone sideways, about an investor who'd tried to lowball him and lived to regret it, about James accidentally scheduling him for 2 meetings at the same time and the resulting chaos. His voice was steady and calm, and Lena held on to it like a lifeline. They made it to the hospital, a private facility where Dr. Chen was already waiting. The next several hours blurred together in waves of pain and exhaustion. Lena had read about labor, attended classes, thought she was prepared. She wasn't. Nothing prepared you for the reality of it. The way pain built and built until you thought you couldn't survive another second. Then somehow you did. Adrian stayed through all of it, held her hand, let her squeeze until his fingers went white, murmured encouragement that was stilted and awkward but genuine. He looked terrified the entire time, but he didn't leave. "I can't do this," Lena gasped during a particularly brutal contraction. "You are doing it." Adrian wiped sweat from her forehead. "You're the strongest person I know. You can do anything. Easy for you to say. You're not the one." Another contraction cut her off, and she made a sound that was more animal than human. "Almost there," Dr. Chen said from her position at the foot of the bed. "One more big push, Lena. You're almost done." Lena pushed with everything she had left, and suddenly there was a sound, a thin, angry wail that cut through everything else. Dr. Chen lifted a tiny, red, wrinkled creature that was screaming its displeasure at being born. "She's here," Dr. Chen said, smiling. "You have a daughter." They placed the baby on Lena's chest, and suddenly nothing else mattered. Not the pain, not the exhaustion, not the complicated mess of the past year. There was just this tiny person with a scrunched-up face and perfect fingers and lungs that worked impressively well. "Hi," Lena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, baby. We've been waiting for you." The baby stopped crying, her eyes, dark blue and unfocused, seeming to find Lena's face. She made a small sound, almost like a question. "I know," Lena said, laughing through tears. "It's weird out here, but you're safe. I promise." She looked up at Adrian, who was staring at their daughter like he'd never seen anything real before. His face was white, his expression completely unguarded. "Do you want to hold her?" Lena asked. "I don't." He stopped, swallowed. "What if I drop her?" "You won't drop her. Come here." Dr. Chen helped transfer the baby to Adrian's arms, showing him how to support her head, where to put his hands. Adrian held his daughter with the same careful intensity he'd used on the practice dolls, but this time there was wonder mixed with the fear. The baby looked up at him, and her tiny face scrunched in what might have been confusion or concentration. Then, impossibly, her expression smoothed, and she made a small, satisfied sound. "She knows you," Lena said softly. "She can't. She's minutes old. She's been hearing your voice for months, feeling your hands on my stomach. She knows you." Lena watched them together, this dangerous man and this tiny person, and felt something settle in her chest. "You're her father. She knows." Adrian's eyes were wet. He didn't cry. Lena didn't think he knew how, but his eyes were definitely wet. "She's so small." 5 pounds, 3 ounces, Dr. Chen said. "Small, but healthy. Perfect APGAR scores. She's going to be just fine." "Sophia," Adrian said suddenly. Lena looked at him. "What?" "Her name. Sophia." He looked down at their daughter. "It means wisdom. I want her to be wiser than both of us." "Sophia," Lena repeated, testing it. It fit, elegant but strong, classic but not pretentious. "Sophia Voss." "Sophia Grace Voss," Adrian amended. "After your mother, if you want." Lena's throat tightened. "Yes, I want that." They stayed like that for a long time. Lena in the hospital bed, Adrian in the chair beside her, Sophia sleeping between them. The rest of the world fell away. There were no contracts, no obligations, no complicated histories. Just 3 people learning how to be a family. The first week home was brutal. Sophia had strong opinions about sleep schedules. Specifically, she opposed them entirely. She'd wake every 2 hours to eat, scream her displeasure at being wet or cold, or simply existing, then finally collapse into sleep just long enough for Lena and Adrian to think they might rest before starting the cycle again. Adrian approached fatherhood the way he approached everything, with methodical intensity. He kept detailed logs of feeding times, diaper changes, sleep patterns, like he could solve the mystery of their daughter through data analysis. It was excessive and slightly insane, but it also meant he noticed things. When Sophia got fussy at exactly 7 p.m. every night, Adrian was the one who realized it was gas and figured out the right way to burp her. When she wouldn't settle at 3 a.m., he discovered she liked being held upright against his chest while he walked. his heartbeat apparently soothing in ways nothing else was. "You're a natural," Lena said one night, watching him pace with Sophia tucked against his shoulder. "I'm following patterns." But his voice was soft, and his hand moved in gentle circles on Sophia's back. "She responds to consistency, structure. She responds to you." Lena stood, moving closer. "You could just admit you're good at this." "I'm adequate at following instructions." "You're more than adequate." She touched his arm. "You haven't slept more than 3 hours straight in a week, but you show up every time she needs something. That's not just following instructions. That's being a good father." Adrian looked down at Sophia, whose tiny face was finally relaxing into sleep. "She's so fragile. I keep thinking about all the ways I could accidentally hurt her." "But you haven't, and you won't." Lena guided them both back to the bedroom. "You're terrified of making mistakes, so you're careful. That carefulness is what makes you good at this." They got Sophia into her bassinet, a process that required the stealth of trained assassins, and collapsed into bed. Adrian pulled Lena against him, his body warm and solid. 3 more months, he said quietly. Then the contract expires. Lena had been thinking about that. The year was almost up. Soon she'd have to make the choice Adrian had offered: stay without obligation or leave with the settlement and start over. "We should talk about that," she said. "Not yet." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "Let's get through these first few months, figure out how we work as parents. Then we'll talk about the future." It was a delay tactic, and they both knew it, but Lena let it go. There would be time for difficult conversations later. Grace came to visit when Sophia was 3 weeks old. She walked into the penthouse and immediately demanded to hold her granddaughter, cooing over Sophia's tiny fingers and perfect nose with the kind of unrestrained joy that made Lena's chest ache. "She's beautiful," Grace said, tears in her eyes. "Absolutely perfect. She screams for 3 hours every evening and refuses to sleep more than 90 minutes at a time," Lena said. "She's exhausting." "She's a newborn. That's what they do." Grace looked up, and her expression was knowing. "But you love her anyway." "More than I thought possible." Lena sat beside her mother, watching Sophia sleep in her grandmother's arms. "Is it always like this? This terrifying?" "Always. From the moment they're born until the day you die, you worry about them." Grace smiled. "But it's worth it. Every sleepless night, every moment of fear, worth it for this." Adrian appeared from his office, stopped when he saw Grace holding Sophia. There was something vulnerable in his expression, something that suggested he wasn't sure he was allowed to interrupt. "Come here," Grace said, gesturing him over. "You should see how she looks when someone who shares her DNA holds her." Adrian sat on Lena's other side, and Grace carefully transferred Sophia to him. The baby stirred, made a small, unhappy sound, then settled when Adrian's hand came up to support her head. "You're getting good at that," Grace observed. "Practice." But Adrian's attention was entirely on Sophia, watching the way her face twitched in sleep. "Lots of practice." "The contract expires soon," Grace said, and the statement hung in the air like a blade. "What happens then?" Adrian and Lena exchanged glances. They still hadn't talked about it, kept pushing it off, pretending they had more time than they did. "We haven't decided," Lena said finally. "Then decide." Grace's tone was gentle but firm. "This baby girl deserves to know whether her parents are building something permanent or just playing house until the paperwork expires." "It's complicated," Adrian started. "It's not complicated. Either you want to be a family or you don't." Grace looked between them. "I know how this started. I know about the contract, the arrangement, all of it. But that was then. Now you have a child together. Now you've built something that looks an awful lot like love, even if neither of you wants to admit it." "I don't know how to love someone," Adrian said quietly. "Yes, you do. You do it every time you wake up at 2 a.m. to change her diaper. Every time you hold her like she's precious. Every time you look at my daughter like she's the only thing keeping you human." Grace's voice softened. "Love isn't some mysterious feeling you either have or don't have. It's a choice you make every day. And from where I'm sitting, you've been choosing love for months now." After Grace left, Adrian and Lena sat together in the nursery, watching Sophia sleep in her fortress crib. The security monitors glowed softly, showing every angle of the room. Outside, armed guards rotated shifts. It was excessive and necessary, and exactly what their life had become. "Your mother is right," Adrian said, We need to decide. I know. Lena leaned against him. What do you want? I want you to stay. I want us to be a real family, not because of a contract, but because we choose it. He turned to look at her. But I need to know you're choosing it for the right reasons. Not because I'm paying for your mother's care, not because we have a child together, not because you think you owe me something. What are the right reasons? Because you want to, because us, Sophia, the life we're building, because it makes you happy. Adrian's voice roughened. I can't be your prison, Lena. I won't be the thing that traps you. You're not trapping me. You stopped being my captor months ago. Lena took his hand. But I need to know what I'm agreeing to if I stay. What does real family mean to you? What does our life look like? Adrian thought about this, and Lena could see him working through scenarios, weighing options. We tear up the contract. No more prenup, no settlement, no financial arrangements. We get married again. Actually married because we want to be, not because I'm buying you. We raise Sophia together. We figure out how to balance my work with her needs. We probably argue a lot about security protocols and appropriate risk levels. That sounds accurate. Lena smiled slightly. What else? I try to be better, not perfect. I'll never be perfect, but better than I was. More patient, more present, less controlling when I can manage it. He squeezed her hand. And you promise to call me on my bullshit when I slide back into old patterns. I can do that. Lena turned to face him fully. Here's what I need. I need you to trust me to make decisions about Sophia without requiring security approval for everything. I need us to have a life outside this penthouse. Friends, experiences, normal things. And I need you to keep trying to be vulnerable, even when it's uncomfortable. I can try. Adrian pulled her closer. I can't promise I'll always succeed. I don't need you to always succeed. I just need you to keep trying. Lena kissed him, and it was soft and careful and real. I choose this. I choose you. Not because I have to, but because I want to. You're sure? I'm terrified and exhausted and covered in spit up. She gestured at her shirt, which had definitely seen better days. But yes, I'm sure. Adrian kissed her again, deeper this time, and when they pulled apart, his eyes were suspiciously bright. We should probably make it official. Tear up the contract, I mean. Now? Why wait? They found the contract in Adrian's office safe. 47 pages of legal language that had dictated their lives for the past year. Adrian pulled it out, and for a moment they both just looked at it. This thing saved my mother's life, Lena said. This thing brought you into my life. Adrian held it between them. But we don't need it anymore. Together, they tore it in half, then in quarters, then into pieces so small they were basically confetti. It was dramatic and unnecessary and felt absolutely right. What now? Lena asked, surrounded by contract debris. Now we build something without rules or obligations. Adrian pulled her close. Just us, figuring it out as we go. Sophia started crying from the nursery, her particular brand of hungry and angry that would escalate quickly if ignored. Adrian and Lena looked at each other, and despite the exhaustion, they both smiled. Together? Adrian asked. Together. They walked to the nursery hand in hand, ready to face another feeding, another diaper change, another night of interrupted sleep. But this time it wasn't an obligation or a contract requirement. It was just two people who'd found each other in darkness and decided to build something in the light. Sophia was 6 months old when Lena's mother got remarried. Grace had met someone, a widower named Tom who'd been in one of her cancer support groups. The wedding was small, held in a garden that Tom's late wife had loved, and it was beautiful in a way that made Lena's chest ache. Your father would have approved, Grace said, holding Sophia while Lena adjusted her dress. Tom's a good man, kind, patient. He makes me laugh. You deserve that, Lena said. After everything, you deserve happiness. So do you. Grace looked at her daughter. Are you? Happy? Lena thought about it. Her life was nothing like she'd imagined a year ago. She'd married a man who bought her, got pregnant by accident, and was now raising a child in a penthouse fortress with security that made airports look casual. Adrian still struggled with emotional expression, still controlled what he could control, still occasionally made decisions that prioritized safety over normalcy. But he also woke up at 3 a.m. without complaint, knew exactly how Sophia liked to be held when she was fussy, and looked at both of them like they'd saved him from drowning. He was learning, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely, how to be soft in the spaces where it mattered. "Yes," Lena said, "I'm happy. It's not the happiness I thought I wanted, but it's real. It's ours. That's all that matters." Grace kissed her forehead. "Now go find that husband of yours and dance with him. He's been standing in the corner looking uncomfortable for 20 minutes. Lena found Adrian exactly where her mother had predicted, standing apart from the celebration, watching everything with the hyper-awareness of someone who'd learned to constantly assess threats. But when he saw her approaching, his expression softened. "You look beautiful," he said. "You look miserable. Weddings make me uncomfortable." He glanced at the crowd. "Too many people, too many variables, too many places for things to go wrong." "Nothing's going to go wrong. It's my mother's wedding, not a hostile takeover." Lena took his hand. "Dance with me." "I don't dance." "You don't dance well. There's a difference." She pulled him toward where other couples were swaying to music that was more enthusiasm than skill. "Come on, make my mother happy." Adrian let himself be pulled onto the makeshift dance floor, his movements stiff and uncertain. Lena put his hands where they should go, one on her waist, one holding hers, and started moving. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "This is normal." She smiled up at him. "Normal people dance at weddings. Normal people celebrate love. We're practicing being normal." "We're never going to be normal." "Probably not. But we can pretend for an afternoon." Lena rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Besides, Sophia's watching. We should set a good example." Adrian glanced over at where Victor was holding Sophia, the massive Russian looking absurdly gentle with the tiny baby in his arms. Their daughter was awake and alert, her dark eyes, Adrian's eyes, tracking movement around the garden. "She's going to have questions when she gets older," Adrian said. "About how we met, about the contract, about everything. Then we'll tell her the truth. That we started as a business arrangement and became something real." Lena looked up at him. "That sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances if you're willing to work for them. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's messy and complicated, and we're probably going to screw up in ways we can't even imagine yet." She squeezed his hand. "But we're screwing up together. That has to count for something." Adrian pulled her closer, and for once he wasn't tense or hyper-aware or calculating threats. He was just present, in the moment, dancing badly at a wedding with his wife and daughter nearby. "I love you," he said quietly. "I don't know if I'm saying it right or if it's what you want to hear, but I love you." Lena's breath caught. In the year they'd known each other, Adrian had never said those words, had never even come close. She'd made peace with the idea that maybe he couldn't, that the damage ran too deep. "Say it again," she whispered. "I love you." Adrian's voice was rough but certain. "I love you and I love Sophia, and I'm terrified every single day that I'm going to ruin this. But I'm going to keep trying not to. I'm going to keep choosing you, keep choosing us, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "I love you too." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "You're difficult and controlling, and you make everything more complicated than it needs to be. But you're trying to be better, and that matters. You matter." They swayed together as the music continued, two damaged people who'd found each other in darkness and decided to stay. Around them, people celebrated love and new beginnings. Above them, the sky was clear and bright. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be more arguments about security protocols, more nights of interrupted sleep, more moments when Adrian's past collided with their present. Lena would struggle with independence in a life that required constant protection. Adrian would struggle with vulnerability in a relationship that demanded emotional honesty. But they'd face it together, messily, imperfectly, genuinely. They'd build a family from the wreckage of a business arrangement, create love from the ashes of desperation. That night, after the wedding ended and they returned home, Lena put Sophia to bed while Adrian dismantled the excessive security he'd installed for the evening. She found him afterward on the roof, the same spot where they'd stood months ago when everything was uncertain. "Contract's been expired for 3 months, Lena said, joining him. "I know. We never filed the divorce papers." "I know that too." Adrian pulled her against him. "Are we going to? Do you want to?" "No." He turned to face her. "I want to stay married to you. I want to raise Sophia together. I want to figure out how to be a family without contracts or obligations or business arrangements. Just us, choosing each other every day. That sounds terrifying. It is. Adrian's smile was small but real. But we've survived everything else. We can survive this too. Lena kissed him, and it was soft and certain and full of promise. Below them, the city moved through its endless cycle of light and darkness. Inside, their daughter slept in her fortress nursery, protected by the security of her father's paranoia and the love of parents who'd learned how to build something beautiful from broken pieces. They'd started as a transaction, a desperate woman selling a year of her life for her mother's survival, a damaged man buying a wife to fill a contract's requirements. They'd been bound by paperwork and obligation and mutual desperation. But somewhere between the wedding that neither wanted and the daughter they never planned for, between late-night conversations and early morning feedings, between violence and vulnerability, they'd become something real. They'd become a family, and that was worth more than all the contracts in the world.